When Elena Varelli's trembling hand sent scalding espresso across the most dangerous man in Baltimore's underworld, every witness expected her death. Instead, Dominic Raines saw something in her bruised wrists and terrified eyes that changed everything, the same trapped desperation he'd once known. What should have been her final mistake became her first step toward freedom. But escaping her husband's perfect facade would require more than courage. It would demand she become dangerous herself. Stay until the end to see how one spilled drink dismantled an empire. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far Elena's story travels. Pinon. The crystal chandelier above table 7 cast prismatic light across the white linen tablecloth, creating rainbows that danced with every slight vibration of footsteps across Marcello's polished marble floors. Elena Varelli moved through that light like a ghost, her reflection fragmenting across the rows of wine glasses she carried on her silver tray. 14 delicate stems, balanced with the precision of someone who'd learned that mistakes had consequences far beyond a broken glass. Her hands didn't shake. Not anymore. She'd trained them into stillness the same way she'd trained her face into the pleasant, unremarkable expression that made customers look past her rather than at her. Invisible. Safe. That's what she needed to be during the dinner shift at Baltimore's most exclusive restaurant, where power brokers and politicians paid $500 per person to be seen in the right company. The bruise on her left wrist had faded to a sickly yellow-green that she'd covered with foundation and concealer that morning, layering it carefully before Victor inspected her appearance. The makeup had held through the first 4 hours of her shift, but now, as she approached table 7 with the espresso service, she could feel the fabric of her long-sleeved uniform rubbing against the tender skin beneath. "Your espressos, gentlemen," she said softly, her voice pitched to carry without demanding attention. The art of being heard but not noticed. Table 7 held 4 men in suits that cost more than her monthly rent. 3 of them barely glanced up from their conversation about waterfront development contracts. But the 4th man, the one seated with his back to the corner, positioning that gave him a clear view of both entrances, watched her with the kind of attention that made her skin prickle with warning. Dominic Raines. She'd heard the whispered name from the other servers, recognized him from news reports that danced carefully around what he actually did for a living. Businessman, they called him, consultant, and investor. Words that meant nothing and everything in a city where power had many faces. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the cold calculation in his gray eyes. He wore his expensive suit the way other men wore armor, and when he looked at her, Elena felt stripped down to every vulnerable truth she'd worked so hard to hide. "Thank you," he said, his voice surprisingly quiet. Controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need to rise to command attention. She nodded and began setting down the small cups with steady hands, muscle memory guiding her through the familiar choreography. Left to right, saucer first, then cup, spoon at 3 o'clock, sugar bowl within easy reach. She'd done this 1,000 times, could do it in her sleep, could do it while planning grocery lists and calculating whether she'd have enough time to stop at the pharmacy before Victor got home from his afternoon inspection route. That's why she didn't see the man behind her until it was too late. "Telling you, Raines, the Harbor Point situation needs to be handled before—" The man from table 5 stepped backward without looking, his gesturing hand connecting with Elena's shoulder just as she'd lifted the 4th espresso from her tray. She felt the impact, felt her careful balance disrupted, watched in the stretched-out horror of slow motion as the delicate cup tilted as steaming dark liquid arced through the air in a perfect parabola of disaster. The espresso hit Dominic Raines square in the chest, spreading across his dove-gray shirt and silk tie in an ugly brown stain. The entire restaurant seemed to inhale at once. Elena's tray clattered to the floor. Her training, all those careful lessons about proper service, about grace under pressure, about maintaining composure, shattered like the porcelain cups now spreading coffee across Marcello's imported marble. In that frozen moment, she didn't see the ruined suit or the stain spreading across expensive fabric. She saw Victor's face the last time she'd made a mistake, saw his hand moving faster than she could block, felt the impact that had left her ears ringing for 2 days. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She flinched backward, arms coming up in a defensive position that was pure instinct, pure survival response trained into her nervous system over 3 years of marriage. Her ankle twisted in her sensible black heels and she stumbled, going down hard on one knee among the broken china and spreading coffee. "I'm sorry," she gasped, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I'm so sorry. He didn't. I'll pay for the dry cleaning. Please. I'm sorry. She was reaching for the fallen cups with shaking hands, trying to gather the broken pieces while coffee soaked into her uniform pants, when she realized that Dominic Raines hadn't moved, hadn't yelled, hadn't raised his hand or his voice or done any of the things she'd braced herself to receive. The silence stretched out like pulled glass, ready to shatter. Slowly, Elena looked up. Raines was still seated, coffee dripping from his chin onto what remained of his dry shirt. His three companions had frozen mid-conversation, their faces registering various shades of shock and anticipation. The entire restaurant had gone quiet, 100 conversations stopping as every eye turned to witness what happened when someone, especially someone as insignificant as a waitress, made the mistake of spilling something on Dominic Raines. But he wasn't looking at his ruined clothes. He was looking at her arms, still raised in that defensive position. Looking at her wrist, where her hasty movement had pulled her sleeve up to reveal the full spectrum of bruising that no amount of makeup could completely hide. Looking at her face with an expression she couldn't read but that made something in her chest constrict with an emotion she'd forgotten how to name. "Stand up," he said quietly. It wasn't a command, not quite, but Elena's legs obeyed anyway, muscle memory responding to male authority the way Victor had trained her to respond. She stood on shaking legs, hyper-aware of the coffee staining her uniform, of the broken china at her feet, of every single person watching this moment unfold. Raines stood as well, moving with deliberate slowness. He was taller than she'd realized, broad-shouldered beneath the ruined suit. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, real linen, monogrammed, and wiped the coffee from his face with careful precision. "It was an accident," he said, his voice carrying across the silent restaurant. Not to her, to everyone. A statement of fact that somehow felt like protection. Elena's manager materialized at her elbow, his face flushed with panic and rage barely contained beneath his professional mask. "Mr. Raines, I am so incredibly sorry. This is absolutely unacceptable. I assure you." "An accident," Raines repeated, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "Caused by the gentleman from table 5 who wasn't watching where he was walking. The man who'd bumped her, some city councilman whose name Elena couldn't remember, had gone pale. I didn't see... I wasn't... Clearly," Raines folded his stained handkerchief with precise movements. "Someone bring me a towel, and get her a chair." "Sir, I don't think..." her manager started. "Now." The single word cut through every objection. A server appeared with a pristine white towel. Another pulled out the chair opposite Raines's seat. Elena stood frozen, unable to process what was happening, unable to reconcile the stories she'd heard about this man with the reality unfolding before her. "Sit," Raines said to her, his tone gentler than it had been with anyone else. Elena sat. She had no choice, really. Her legs had started shaking so badly she wasn't sure they'd hold her much longer anyway. Raines sat across from her, ignoring his companion's confused expressions, ignoring the manager hovering anxiously nearby, ignoring the entire restaurant full of people waiting to see what he would do next. He studied her with the same intensity he might give a contract negotiation or a business adversary, and Elena felt more exposed than she had when she'd been kneeling in spilled coffee at his feet. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Elena Varelli." "How long have you worked here, Elena?" 6 months. She didn't understand why he was asking, didn't understand any of this. "Sir, I really am sorry about your suit. The suit doesn't matter." He leaned forward slightly. "How did you get those bruises?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Around them, she could feel the restaurant's attention sharpen, could sense people leaning in to hear her answer. Her manager's face had gone from panic to calculation, already wondering what kind of liability this conversation represented. "I'm clumsy," Elena said automatically, the lie she'd told so many times it came without thought. "I fell down the stairs at home." "Twice?" Raines's eyes dropped to her other wrist, where another set of finger-shaped bruises marked her skin. "In the same week?" Heat flooded her face. "I should get back to work. Mr. Castellano?" She looked at her manager, desperate for rescue even from his anger. "I'll pay for the cups and the espresso. It'll come out of my check." "You'll do nothing of the sort," Raines said. He looked at the manager. "She's not at fault. Your security footage will confirm that Councilman Morrison," he nodded toward the pale man from table 5, "created the situation. Any damage comes out of his bill, not hers." Of course, mister. Rains, absolutely. And she gets a 30-minute break, paid, starting now. Sir, our policy... Rains looked at the manager, said nothing. Didn't need to. The threat was there in his silence, in the weight of who he was and what he represented in this city. Of course, the manager said quickly. Elena, take your break. 30 minutes. Elena stood on trembling legs, desperate to escape the attention, the questions, the awful knowing expression in Dominic Raines's eyes. But before she could flee, he spoke again. Elena. She stopped, couldn't help but turn back to face him. He'd pulled a business card from his wallet, heavy cream cardstock with simple black lettering. He set it on the table between them like a chess piece being moved into position. You're going to tell me I'm overstepping, he said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears only. You're going to say I don't know your situation, that I'm making assumptions, that you're fine, and maybe you will be. But on the chance you're not, on the chance you ever need help that you can't find anywhere else, that number will reach me, anytime, day or night. Elena stared at the card, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Why? Because I recognize the signs. Because I know what it looks like when someone's built a cage around you and convinced the world it's a house. He paused. Because nobody offered me that card when I needed it, and I've regretted it every day since. She should leave it there. Should walk away. Pretend this conversation never happened. Maintain the careful fiction that kept her world from imploding. But her hand moved of its own accord, reaching out to take the card, feeling the weight of it like a promise or a threat she couldn't quite define. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Raines said. Just remember, the door's open. All you have to do is walk through it. Elena fled to the break room, the card burning like a brand in her pocket. The remainder of her shift passed in a blur of automatic movements and forced smiles. Elena delivered plates and cleared tables and refilled water glasses while her mind spun in tight circles, unable to settle, unable to process what had happened. The other servers gave her strange looks, whispering behind their hands. Her manager watched her with calculation in his eyes, probably already planning how to contain whatever damage had been done by her very public interaction with Dominic Raines. None of it mattered as much as the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes until 10:30, when her shift ended and she had to go home. Home! The word had lost all its warmth 3 years ago, when she'd married Victor Hale and moved into his pristine townhouse in Bolton Hill. Back then, she'd thought herself lucky. Victor was handsome, successful, attentive in ways that had made her head spin after years of being overlooked. He was a city building inspector with a spotless reputation, the kind of man who showed up to community board meetings and volunteered for neighborhood cleanup days. The kind of man mothers pointed to as an example of what their daughters should seek. The kind of man who knew exactly how to hurt her without leaving marks that showed. Elena changed in the employee bathroom, carefully buttoning her coat to cover the coffee-stained uniform she'd worked the rest of her shift in. Her manager had been too rattled by Raines's intervention to make her change, and she'd been grateful for the small mercy. The business card felt heavy in her pocket, a tangible weight that seemed to grow with each passing minute. She should throw it away, should forget this entire evening happened, should go home and be the wife Victor expected, the one who had dinner waiting and the house perfect and never ever stepped out of line. But she couldn't make herself drop the card in the trash. Instead, she tucked it deep into her purse, buried beneath her wallet and her phone and the collection of receipts she'd need to organize for Victor's weekly financial review. He checked everything, every dollar spent, every minute unaccounted for, every deviation from the schedule he'd so carefully constructed. The night air hit her like a slap as she stepped out of Marcello's back entrance. November in Baltimore meant bitter cold and wind that cut through her coat like it wasn't there. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered cars belonging to the closing staff. Her aging Honda sat in the far corner, purchased before she'd met Victor, one of the few things she still owned that was truly hers. She'd made it halfway across the lot when her phone buzzed. "Where are you?" Victor's text message was all caps, the digital equivalent of a raised voice. Elena's stomach clenched as she checked the time. 10:47. She was supposed to be home by 10:45. 17 minutes, she whispered to herself, her breath fogging in the cold air. The drive from Marcello's to Bolton Hill was 17 minutes if she caught the lights right, if traffic cooperated, if nothing went wrong. Her fingers trembled as she typed, "Shift ran late. On my way." The response came immediately. "How late?" "Manager needed help closing, sorry." She climbed into her car, started the engine with a prayer that it would turn over on the first try. The Honda coughed but caught, and Elena pulled out of the parking lot faster than was strictly safe, her mind already running through the script she'd need to deliver when she got home. Apologetic but not defensive. Sorry, but not making excuses. The delicate balance Victor demanded. Her phone buzzed again at the first red light. Did something happen? Elena's blood went cold. How did he know? Had someone already called him? Did Marcello's have cameras that fed to some system Victor had access to through his inspection work? Or was it just his usual paranoia, the constant questions designed to keep her off balance? Nothing happened, she typed. Just a busy night. The light turned green. She pressed the gas, watching her speed carefully. Getting pulled over would make everything worse. Being late was bad enough. Her phone stayed mercifully quiet for the next 12 minutes. Elena drove through Bolton Hill's tree-lined streets, past the renovated row houses and boutique storefronts that made the neighborhood one of Baltimore's most desirable addresses. Victor's townhouse stood on a corner lot, its brick facade perfectly maintained, its window boxes planted with seasonal flowers that he changed 4 times a year. The porch light was on. So was the living room light, both signs that Victor was waiting, watching. Elena parked in the narrow driveway, gathered her purse and coat, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. She'd learned to prepare her face before entering the house, to arrange her features into whatever expression the situation demanded. Tonight called for apologetic concern, maybe a touch of exhaustion to explain why she was late without suggesting she'd been negligent. The front door opened before she reached it. Victor stood silhouetted in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of their meticulously decorated foyer. He was still wearing his work clothes, crisp khakis and a polo shirt with the city inspector's badge embroidered over the breast pocket. At 38, he maintained the kind of fitness that came from rigid discipline, morning runs that never varied by more than 30 seconds, meals measured to the gram. His sandy blonde hair was starting to gray at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. "You're 23 minutes late," he said. Not hello, not how was your shift. Just the accusation, delivered in that calm, measured tone that was somehow worse than shouting. "I'm sorry," Elena said, climbing the steps with her keys already tucked away, her purse held in front of her like a shield. "Mr. Castellano needed help with the closing inventory, and I couldn't say no." Couldn't or didn't want to? Couldn't. He's my manager, Victor. When he asks me to stay, I have to stay. She'd reached the top step now, close enough to see the muscle twitching in his jaw, the sign of anger barely restrained. Victor prided himself on his control, on never being the kind of man who lost his temper in obvious ways. But Elena had learned to read the subtle signs, the small tells that meant she needed to be very, very careful. "Come inside," he said, stepping back to let her enter. The townhouse's interior was warm, decorated with the kind of tasteful neutrality that graced home design magazines. Everything had its place. Every surface gleamed, every detail reflected the image Victor had worked so hard to construct. Successful, respectable, perfect. Elena set her purse on the small table by the door, exactly where it belonged, and started to unbutton her coat. "Leave it," Victor said. She froze, her fingers on the third button. "Come into the kitchen." Elena followed him through the living room, past the dining table set for a dinner that had clearly gone cold, into the kitchen with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The overhead lights were too bright, making her blink after the relative dimness of the rest of the house. Victor leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So, inventory." "Yes." "That's what you're going with?" Elena's heart started to pound. "That's what happened." "Nothing else? Nothing you want to tell me about your evening?" He knew. Somehow he already knew about the spilled espresso, about Dominic Raines, about the business card currently burning a hole in her purse 20 feet away. "It was just a regular shift," she said carefully. "Busy Friday night crowd. Nothing unusual." Victor pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen, turned it to face her. The image showed her kneeling among broken china, looking up at Dominic Raines with an expression she barely recognized on her own face. Raw fear, yes, but something else too. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of it. "David Morrison sent me this about an hour ago," Victor said conversationally. "Said he witnessed an incident at Marcello's tonight involving my wife and a known criminal. He was concerned. Thought I should know that you'd been fraternizing with dangerous elements." "I wasn't fraternizing," Elena said quickly. "Someone bumped into me and I spilled coffee on a customer. Mr. Raines was just..." He was being decent about it, that's all. Decent. Victor set his phone down with deliberate care. Dominic Raines doesn't do decent, Elena. He does strategic. He does calculated. The question is, why would he waste calculation on my wife? He wouldn't. He didn't. It was nothing. Then why did he insist you take a break? Why did he sit there talking to you while his entire table waited? Why? Victor's voice remained level, but something dangerous crept into his tone. Did he give you his personal contact information? Elena's mouth went dry. How did you... David saw that too. He's very observant, David. Very concerned about the company I keep, about the image we present as a couple. Victor pushed off from the counter, moving closer. So, I'll ask you one more time. What happened tonight? The truth would make everything worse, but the lie was already crumbling, exposed by a city councilman's camera phone and opportunistic loyalty. I spilled espresso on him by accident, Elena said, hating how her voice shook. He saw that I was upset and he was kind about it. That's all. He gave you his number. I didn't ask for it. But you took it. Silence stretched between them. Elena knew better than to fill it with more words, more explanations that would only dig her deeper. Where is it? Victor asked quietly. Where's what? The card. His number. Where is it? Elena's mind raced. She could lie, say she'd thrown it away, but if Victor searched her purse and found it, if he checked the restaurant's trash cans or questioned her manager if he caught her in the lie. In my purse, she whispered. Get it. Elena walked back to the foyer on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Her purse sat where she'd left it, innocent and ordinary. She opened it with shaking hands, dug through the contents until her fingers found the cream cardstock of Raines's business card. For a moment, one brief, crystalline moment, she considered keeping it, hiding it, claiming she must have lost it somewhere. Then she remembered the last time she'd lied to Victor about something he already knew the truth about, remembered the bruises that had taken 3 weeks to fully fade. She carried the card back to the kitchen and held it out. Victor took it, examined it with the same meticulous attention he gave building code violations. Interesting. A direct line, not a business number. He really wanted you to be able to reach him. I don't want anything from him. I just want... What? What do you want, Elena? The question was a trap. Every answer she could give would be the wrong one. I want to go to bed, she said finally. I want to forget tonight ever happened. Victor held the card over the sink, pulled a lighter from his pocket, the expensive one his brother had given him for his birthday, and flicked it to life. The small flame caught the edge of the cardstock, and Elena watched the numbers curl and blacken, watched her one chance at something she couldn't even name turn to ash and smoke. There, Victor said, washing the remains down the drain. Forgotten, as if it never happened. He turned to face her fully. But it did happen, didn't it? You embarrassed me tonight. Made me look like a man who can't control his own wife. Made me look weak in front of people whose respect I need for my career. I didn't mean to... I don't care what you meant to do. I care about what you did. He moved closer, backing her against the refrigerator. He didn't raise his hand, didn't touch her at all, but Elena felt trapped anyway. You work at Marcello's because I allow it. You have a car because I allow it. You have any freedom at all because I choose to give it to you. But that choice can be revoked, Elena. Very easily. I understand. Do you? Because I'm starting to wonder if you've forgotten how good you have it here, how much worse things could be. Elena closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe evenly, to stay calm. This was a test. Victor loved his tests, his ways of measuring her obedience and gratitude. I haven't forgotten, she said. I'm sorry I was late. I'm sorry about what happened at Marcello's. It won't happen again. No, Victor agreed. It won't, because you're going to call Mr. Castellano tomorrow and quit. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? No, Victor, please. You clearly can't be trusted to maintain appropriate boundaries with customers. And I clearly can't focus on my work when I'm worried about what situations you're getting yourself into. I need that job, Elena said desperately. The money was nothing. Victor controlled their finances completely, depositing her paychecks into an account she couldn't access. But the job itself, those hours away from this house, from him, from the suffocating weight of being his wife, that was everything. Please don't make me quit. You should have thought of that before you started taking phone numbers from criminals. Victor stepped back, his expression settling into something almost sympathetic, almost kind. This is for your own good, Elena. You'll see that eventually. Now go upstairs and shower. You smell like coffee and other people's sweat. Elena fled. She took the stairs two at a time, her vision blurring with tears she couldn't let fall, her chest tight with a scream she couldn't release. In the bathroom she shared with Victor, but that bore none of her personality. He'd redone it when they'd married, removing all her products and preferences. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, thin in a way that had nothing to do with health, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun that Victor preferred, her face carefully made up even for a restaurant shift because Victor insisted she always look put together. Her brown eyes held a flatness that frightened her when she let herself really look. When had she become this person? When had Elena Varelli, who'd graduated top of her class in accounting, who'd had job offers from 3 different firms, who'd turned down a promotion to date Victor because he'd convinced her they'd have more time together if she took the waitressing job instead? When had that woman disappeared? The answer was clear and terrible. She'd disappeared piece by piece, trade by trade, compromise by compromise until there was nothing left but this hollow echo wearing her face. Elena turned on the shower, letting the water heat while she undressed. The bruises on her wrists looked darker under the bathroom's fluorescent lights. The one on her ribs from last week was fading to yellow. The marks were always carefully placed, always where clothes would cover them. She stepped under the spray, letting water as hot as she could stand it wash away the smell of coffee and kitchen grease and the memory of Dominic Raines looking at her with recognition in his eyes. The kind of recognition that said he knew what was happening to her. The kind that said he'd help if she asked. But she'd watched him burn his number. Watched her one chance at escape literally go up in smoke. Elena pressed her forehead against the tile and finally let herself cry, the sound lost beneath the rush of water, where Victor couldn't hear it and punish her for weakness. Mutz. She woke at 6 a.m. to the smell of coffee and the sound of Victor moving around the kitchen below. Elena lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, before forcing herself out of bed. The shower had done nothing to ease the knot of tension in her shoulders. Neither had the night's fitful sleep, interrupted by dreams of drowning and falling and reaching for help that never came. The face that greeted her in the mirror looked worse than it had the night before. Eyes shadowed, skin pale, the set of her mouth tight with anxiety that had become her constant companion. She dressed in the clothes Victor preferred for her days off. Nice jeans without holes or distressing, a fitted sweater in a neutral color, minimal jewelry. She applied makeup with practiced efficiency, covering the circles under her eyes, adding color to lips that had gone bloodless. Downstairs, Victor had already set out breakfast. Oatmeal with precisely measured portions of fruit and nuts, black coffee for him, green tea for her. He was reading something on his tablet, dressed for a Saturday of inspections, his expression pleasant and relaxed. "Good morning," he said, looking up as she entered. "Sleep well?" As if last night hadn't happened. As if he hadn't threatened to take away the one thing keeping her sane. "Fine," Elena lied, sliding into her chair. "Good. I've been thinking about our conversation." Victor set down his tablet. "The job situation." Elena's heart sank. "Victor, let me finish. I was hasty last night. You're right that you need structure to your days, something to keep you busy. So here's what we'll do. You can keep the job, but you're switching to morning shifts only. Nothing past 3 p.m. That way you're home when I get home, and we don't have a repeat of last night's situation." Relief and resentment warred in Elena's chest. Morning shifts meant less money. The lunch crowd tipped nothing compared to dinner service. It meant seeing less of the other servers she'd started to become friendly with. But it was better than losing the job entirely. "Thank you," she made herself say. "You'll call Castellano after breakfast and request the change. If he can't accommodate it, then we revisit the quitting conversation." Victor returned to his tablet. "Also, I've been looking at our finances. Your spending has been erratic lately." Elena's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "The pharmacy. You've been there 3 times in the last 2 weeks." "I needed—" She scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't set him off. "Pain reliever. For headaches." 3 times. For headaches? Victor's tone was mild, curious. The most dangerous tone he had. "That seems excessive." The truth was that she'd been buying prepaid credit cards with her tips, small denominations that she'd been hiding in various places around the house. Emergency money, escape money, the kind of planning she'd barely admitted to herself she was doing. I kept forgetting which bottle I'd opened, Elena said, so I bought more to make sure I had some. I'm sorry, I should have been more careful. Victor studied her across the table. Well, to help you be more careful, I've set up automatic alerts on your debit card. I'll get a notification whenever you make a purchase. That way I can help you keep track. The walls closed in a little tighter. The cage got a little smaller. That's very thoughtful, Elena heard herself say. I'm just looking out for you. You know that, right? Victor reached across the table, took her hand in his. To anyone watching, it would look affectionate. But his grip was just a fraction too tight, his thumb pressing against the bruise on her wrist. Everything I do is because I love you. I know. Say it back. I love you too. The words tasted like ash, like Dominic Raines's business card burning in the sink, like every other truth she'd traded for peace, for safety, for the illusion that if she just tried hard enough, she could make this marriage into something that didn't slowly kill her. Victor released her hand and stood. I have inspections all morning. I should be home by 2. Make sure you're here. I will be. She watched him gather his things, the inspection tablet, the clipboard, the professional smile he'd wear for property owners and contractors. Watched him transform into the man everyone else saw, the one who'd never raised his voice or his hand, the one who volunteered and voted and kept his lawn perfect. The front door closed behind him. The house fell into silence. Elena sat at the kitchen table, staring at her half-eaten oatmeal, her untouched tea, the morning stretching ahead of her like a prison sentence. She thought about Dominic Raines, about the way he'd looked at her bruises with recognition in his eyes, about the business card she'd never gotten to keep, never gotten to use, about the door he'd said was open, if she could find the courage to walk through it. But the card was ashes now. The number was gone. And even if it wasn't, even if she could somehow find a way to contact him, what would she say? What could Dominic Raines, a criminal, a man whose power came from violence and fear, possibly do to help her escape from a prison with no visible bars? Elena cleared the breakfast dishes with mechanical precision, washed them by hand even though they had a perfectly good dishwasher, dried them and put them away in exactly the places Victor expected them to be. Then she climbed the stairs to the second floor, to the guest room that Victor used as an office, the one she wasn't supposed to enter without permission. The door was locked, as always, but Elena had learned where he kept the spare key, hidden in a volume of building codes on the hallway bookshelf, because who would think to look there? Her hand shook as she unlocked the door and slipped inside. The office was exactly as Victor left it. Immaculate desk, filing cabinets organized by color-coded labels, computer screen dark. Elena moved to the desk, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She shouldn't be doing this. If Victor found out... But she couldn't stop thinking about what Raines had said. About cages that looked like houses. About the way Victor's control had tightened around her so gradually she'd barely noticed until it was too late. Elena woke the computer, grateful that Victor was arrogant enough to use the same password for everything. Her birthday, backwards. Like she was his possession, his creation. The desktop was as organized as everything else Victor touched. Files arranged by category, shortcuts lined up with mathematical precision. Elena opened his email client, her breathing shallow, her ears straining for the sound of the front door, of Victor returning because he'd forgotten something, because he somehow knew what she was doing. She scrolled through his sent messages, looking for what? Evidence? Proof? Something to justify the dread that had lived in her stomach for 3 years? What she found was worse than she'd imagined. Email after email to her former colleagues, her college friends, her family. All of them sent from her account. An account she barely used anymore, that Victor had offered to manage for her because she was so busy with work. Messages written in her voice but not her words, explaining why she couldn't make lunches anymore, why she was pulling away, why they should stop trying to reach her. I've decided to focus on my marriage right now. I hope you understand. Victor and I prefer to keep to ourselves. Please respect our privacy. I don't think our friendship is healthy for me anymore. Take care. One by one, he'd severed her connections, isolated her, made her invisible to everyone who might have noticed what was happening, who might have asked questions or offered help. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely control the mouse. She opened another folder, this one labeled Financial Records. Their joint accounts, their taxes, the household budget Victor maintained with obsessive detail. And another folder, one labeled simply EV, her initials. Inside were files she didn't recognize, account statements from banks she'd never heard of, investment portfolios she'd never opened. All in her name, all with her forged signature, all containing money she'd never seen. The sums made her vision blur. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions even. Where had it come from? How had Victor... Elena clicked on a PDF labeled Inheritance Transfer. The document was dated 6 months after her wedding, right when her grandmother had passed away. The woman who'd raised her after her parents died, who'd promised her the family property in Pennsylvania and the modest savings account she'd accumulated over decades. According to the document in front of her, that inheritance, valued at $2.3 million after property sale, had been transferred to various accounts under Elena's name. Accounts she'd never opened, investments she'd never made. The next file showed wire transfers, moving that money through a dizzying series of shell corporations and offshore accounts, layering it, hiding it, making it impossible to trace. And then, the final folder. The one that made her stomach turn to ice. Files labeled with names, women's names, dates, locations. All of it organized like Victor's inspection reports, detailed and methodical and damning. Elena opened one at random. Found photographs of young women who couldn't have been more than 20, documents showing their employment contracts with various businesses in Baltimore and D.C., financial transactions that made it clear what was really being sold. Human trafficking. Victor was using her inheritance money to fund a trafficking network, hiding it all behind her name, her identity, her unwitting participation. If this was ever discovered, she would go to prison, not him, her. Elena backed away from the computer, her legs hitting the desk chair, sending her sprawling. She caught herself on the edge of the desk, her breathing coming in harsh gasps that she couldn't control. She had to get out, had to run, had to... The front door opened downstairs. "Elena, are you home?" Victor's voice, cheerful and normal, calling from the foyer. Elena's mind went blank with terror. She'd left the office door open. She'd left the computer on. She was standing in the middle of the one room she was absolutely forbidden to enter. "Just a second," she called back, her voice remarkably steady despite the panic screaming through her veins. She closed the files with shaking hands, shut down the computer, bolted for the door. She'd made it 3 steps into the hallway when Victor appeared at the top of the stairs. His eyes went to the office door behind her, open when it should have been locked, then to her face, reading every guilty truth written there. "I thought you had inspections all morning," Elena said, the words tumbling out too fast. "I forgot my secondary tablet." Victor's voice was perfectly calm. "What were you doing in my office?" "I was... think, looking for printer paper. We're out, and I wanted to print some recipes." "The printer paper is in the hall closet. It's always in the hall closet." "I know. I just thought... You thought you'd go through my private office instead?" Victor stepped closer, his body language still relaxed, still non-threatening, but Elena knew better. "What were you really looking for, Elena?" "Nothing, I swear, I just..." His hand shot out faster than she could block, grabbing her wrist, the bruised one, and squeezing hard enough to make her gasp. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not... What did you see?" He squeezed harder, pulling her closer. "What did you look at on my computer?" "Nothing. Victor, please, you're hurting me." "Good." His other hand came up to grip her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Because pain is how you learn, isn't it? How many times do I have to teach you the same lesson?" Elena tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. "Let me go. Tell me what you saw." "I didn't see anything. I didn't even turn on the computer." Victor's eyes searched hers, looking for the lie. She held his gaze, forced herself not to look away, not to give him any reason to doubt her. Finally, he released her. Elena stumbled back, cradling her wrist. "I'm disappointed in you," Victor said quietly. "After everything we discussed last night, I thought you understood. But clearly, you still need boundaries." "I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough anymore." He pulled his phone from his pocket. "Call Castellano. Tell him you quit. Effective immediately." "No," Elena whispered. "No?" Victor's eyebrows rose. "Did you just tell me no?" "Please don't make me do this. Please, I'll do anything else." "Call him. Now. Or I will. And I'll tell him you've been stealing from the tip jar. See how hard it is to find another job in this city with that on your record." He would do it too. Would lie without hesitation, would destroy what little remained of her independence, would smile while he did it. Elena pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. Found Mr. Castellano's number. Pressed call before she could let herself think about what this meant. Elena? Her manager sounded surprised. Everything okay? You're not scheduled today. I know, I'm calling to... Her voice broke. She cleared her throat, tried again. I'm calling to give my notice. I quit. Silence on the other end. Then, is this about what happened last night? Because Mr. Raines made it very clear. It's not about that. It's personal reasons. I'm sorry for the short notice. Elena, if there's something going on, if you need help... Victor was watching her, his expression pleasant, his eyes promising consequences if she said the wrong thing. I'm fine, Elena said. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll drop off my uniform tomorrow. She ended the call before Mr. Castellano could argue further. There, Victor said, satisfaction in his voice. That wasn't so hard, was it? Now we can focus on what really matters. Our marriage, our life together. No more distractions. He headed downstairs to retrieve his forgotten tablet, leaving Elena standing in the hallway, her wrist throbbing, her job gone, her last connection to the outside world severed. She'd seen what Victor was doing, seen the evidence of his crimes, seen how thoroughly he'd framed her for everything. And now she was trapped, completely and utterly, with no way to reach the one person who'd offered to help. Elena walked back to the guest room, to the computer that held proof of Victor's trafficking network and financial fraud. She could download it, could send it to the police, could try to save herself. But Victor would know, would destroy the evidence, would make sure every crime traced back to her and her alone. She needed help, real help. The kind that could outmaneuver a man who'd spent 3 years building the perfect cage. She needed Dominic Raines. But his number was ash in the kitchen sink, and Elena had no way to find him again. Or did she? She closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember the business card in those few seconds before Victor had burned it. Cream cardstock, black lettering, a single phone number starting with 410, Baltimore's area code. What were the other numbers? She'd been too panicked to really look, too focused on the moment to commit them to memory. But maybe someone else had seen. Maybe David Morrison, the councilman who'd photographed the whole encounter, had gotten a clear shot of the card. Maybe the image he'd sent Victor showed more than just Elena's face. It was a desperate hope. A stupid hope. But it was all she had. Elena unlocked Victor's computer again, her heart hammering, opened his messages, found the thread with David Morrison, scrolled through until she found the image. There, in the photograph, on the table between Elena and Raines, slightly out of focus but visible, the business card. Elena zoomed in, squinting at the blurry numbers. 410555. She could make out those digits clearly. The next ones were harder. Was that a 7 or a 1? She grabbed a piece of paper from Victor's printer, wrote down every possible combination of numbers that the blurred image might represent. 16 different possibilities. 16 chances to reach the man who'd promised her a door out of this cage. The sound of Victor's footsteps on the stairs made her close the file, shut down the computer, return the office to exactly how it had been. She slipped the paper into her pocket and stepped into the hallway just as Victor reached the top of the stairs. I'm going to the store, she said, amazed at how steady her voice was. We need groceries for the week. Victor studied her for a long moment. Be back by noon. I will. Elena grabbed her purse and her coat and fled before he could change his mind or ask more questions. The November air hit her like a blessing, cold and sharp and free. She had 2 hours, 16 phone numbers, and the desperate, terrifying hope that one of them would connect her to Dominic Raines before Victor realized what she was planning. Because Elena had finally understood something crucial. She wasn't going to escape Victor through police reports or divorce lawyers or any official channel he could manipulate. The system had already failed her, would continue to fail her, because men like Victor knew how to work the system. No, if she was going to get out of this cage alive, she needed someone who operated outside the system, someone who understood power and violence and how to wield both. She needed a criminal to save her from a monster wearing a respectable mask. Elena pulled her car into the grocery store parking lot and pulled out her phone, staring at the list of numbers with shaking hands. It was time to find out if Dominic Raines had meant what he said about the door being open. All she had to do was find the right key. Elena sat in her car in the grocery store parking lot, staring at the list of 16 phone numbers scrawled on the paper, trembling in her hands. The engine was still running, heat blasting against the November cold seeping through the windows, but she couldn't feel warmth, couldn't feel anything except the frantic hammering of her heart and the weight of the choice she was about to make. Calling Dominic Raines meant crossing a line she could never uncross. It meant admitting that her marriage wasn't just difficult or unhappy, it was dangerous. It meant trusting a criminal with truths she'd barely admitted to herself. It meant gambling everything on the word of a man she'd spoken to for less than 10 minutes. But sitting in Victor's house, watching her world shrink day by day until there was nothing left but fear and compliance, that was a different kind of gamble, one she was losing. Elena pulled out her phone, stared at the first number on her list. Her finger hovered over the dial button for 30 seconds before she forced herself to press it. The phone rang twice before a recorded message informed her the number was not in service. She tried the second number, same result. The third rang 8 times before going to a generic voicemail. Elena hung up without leaving a message. If it was the wrong number, she didn't want her voice preserved anywhere Victor might find it. Fourth number, disconnected. Fifth, belonged to a dry cleaner whose owner sounded confused and annoyed by her stammered apology. Elena checked the time. She'd been gone 22 minutes. Victor expected her back by noon, which gave her 98 minutes total. Minus the 17-minute drive home, minus time to actually buy groceries to maintain the pretense, she had maybe 40 minutes to work through her list. Sixth number, wrong. Seventh, wrong. Eighth rang and rang with no answer, no voicemail, just endless ringing that made her palms sweat and her throat tight. She was about to hang up when someone answered. Yes. Not a question, a statement. A male voice, calm and controlled, that she recognized immediately even through the phone's compression. Mr. Raines. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Silence on the other end. Then, Elena Virelli. Not a question either. He knew. Had probably known the moment he'd answered, had probably seen her name on caller ID or had the kind of resources that told him exactly who was calling before he picked up. I need... She started, then stopped. What did she need? Help was too small a word. Rescue implied she was helpless. Escape suggested she was running without a plan. Where are you? Raines asked. Parking lot. Giant grocery store on Charles Street. Are you alone? Yes. Are you safe right now? This moment? Elena looked around the parking lot, half expecting to see Victor's car pulling in, to discover this had all been a test and she'd failed spectacularly. For now. I have to be home by noon. That's an hour and 20 minutes from now. I know. Is he tracking your phone? The question hadn't even occurred to her. Elena's stomach dropped. I don't know. Maybe. He set up alerts on my bank card this morning, so assume yes. Don't go home. I have to. If I don't show up, he'll... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't articulate the specific ways Victor would make her regret defiance. Elena, Raines's voice cut through her panic like a knife through fog. I need you to listen very carefully. If you go back to that house, this conversation ends. I can't help someone who won't help themselves. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. He's isolated you, taken your job, your money, your connections. He's made you believe you have no options except compliance. And if you get in your car right now and drive home like a good wife, he'll be proven right. The words hit like a slap, shock and anger cutting through the fear. That's not fair. Fair has nothing to do with this. You called me for a reason. Either you want out or you don't. I want out, Elena said, the words surprising her with their vehemence. But I can't just disappear. Victor, he's done things, bad things, and he set them up to look like I did them. If I run, I go to prison. Another pause. When Raines spoke again, his tone had shifted, still controlled but with an edge of something that might have been respect. What kind of things? I can't talk about it on the phone. Then we meet, today, now. I told you, I have to be home by... There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from where you are. Grindhouse. Do you know it? Elena did. She'd driven past it 100 times, had never stopped because it wasn't on Victor's approved list of places she was allowed to go. I can't, she said. He'll know. He'll check my location or ask where I was, or he'll know anyway. Raines's voice was matter-of-fact. You called me from your phone, which you've already admitted he might be monitoring. You're in a parking lot when you're supposed to be shopping. The question isn't whether you can avoid consequences. The question is whether you're willing to accept them in exchange for a chance at freedom. Elena closed her eyes, her free hand gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make her knuckles ache. He was right. She'd already crossed the line the moment she'd dialed his number. Going home now wouldn't undo the damage. It would just mean she'd burned her bridge for nothing. 20 minutes, she said. That's all I can give you. I'll be there in 10. The line went dead. Elena sat frozen for another 30 seconds, her mind screaming at her to start the car, to drive home, to apologize to Victor and pray he'd be merciful. Instead, she turned off the engine, grabbed her purse, and walked 3 blocks through Baltimore's cold morning air to a coffee shop she'd never been allowed to enter. Grindhouse occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. The morning crowd was sparse. A few students with laptops, a couple having an intense whispered conversation in the corner, a barista with purple hair and multiple piercings working the espresso machine. Elena ordered a tea she didn't want and sat at a table near the window where she could watch the street. Her phone sat in front of her like a bomb counting down. 11:17 a.m., 43 minutes until she was supposed to be home. Dominic Raines walked through the door at 11:21. He wasn't wearing a suit today. Dark jeans, a leather jacket over a gray Henley. Boots that looked expensive and well-worn. He looked younger without the formal armor, more approachable, but his eyes held the same sharp intelligence that had unsettled her at Marcello's, and the way he moved through the space suggested someone comfortable with violence as a practical tool rather than an abstract threat. He got coffee, black, no sugar, and slid into the chair across from her without preamble. "Tell me about the bad things your husband has done," he said. No greeting, no small talk, just the question that mattered. Elena wrapped her hands around her teacup, grateful for something to hold on to. "He's using my identity to launder money through a trafficking network. Women. Girls, maybe. I don't know all the details, but I saw the files. Bank accounts in my name, investment portfolios I never opened, wire transfers moving millions through shell corporations, and photographs, documents showing employment contracts that were clearly..." She couldn't say it, couldn't make the words form. "How long has this been going on?" "I don't know. I only found out this morning, but the files go back at least 2 years. Raines took a slow sip of his coffee, his expression unreadable. "Why your identity specifically?" "My grandmother died 6 months after we got married. Left me everything. Property in Pennsylvania, savings, investments, about $2.3 million total. Victor convinced me to let him handle the inheritance. Said he knew people who could invest it properly, make it grow. I was so..." She stopped, swallowed against the shame rising in her throat. "I was so stupid. I trusted him." "Trust isn't stupidity. It's a reasonable response to someone you love. He weaponized it." Raines set down his cup. "Did you sign anything? Paperwork, power of attorney, anything that would give him legal access?" Elena tried to remember. Those first months of marriage had been such a blur of happiness and adjustment, of believing she'd finally found someone who saw her, who valued her. "Maybe? I signed a lot of documents when we bought the house, when we combined finances. He's a city inspector. He's good with paperwork, good at making it all seem routine and necessary. I'm sure he is." Something cold flickered across Raines's face. "Men like your husband are experts at making abuse look like love, at making control look like care. You said last night that you recognized the signs, that nobody offered you a card when you needed it." Elena leaned forward slightly. "What did you mean? That's not relevant to your situation. I'm trusting you with my life right now. I think I deserve to know why you're willing to help me." Raines studied her for a long moment. Then, "My father was a respected defense attorney in this city. Everyone thought he was brilliant, principled, a champion of justice. What they didn't see was what happened behind closed doors. What he did to my mother, to me, and my sister. How he used his legal expertise to make sure we had no recourse, no escape. By the time someone finally noticed, my mother was dead and my sister was so broken she never recovered." The words were delivered in the same calm, controlled tone he'd used for everything else, but Elena heard the rage underneath. The kind of fury that didn't burn hot and fast. It burned cold and permanent, the kind that remade a person from the inside out. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be sorry, be smart." Raines pulled a phone from his jacket pocket. Not his regular phone, something older and simpler. "This is a burner, untraceable. I'm going to give you a number where you can reach me 24 hours a day. Memorize it. Don't write it down. Don't save it in your contacts. Just memorize it." He recited 10 digits. Elena repeated them back 3 times until they stuck. "Good. Now delete our call history from your phone. All of it. The attempts, the connection, everything." Elena's fingers shook as she navigated to her call log and started deleting. He might already know. I said assume he's monitoring. But there's monitoring and then there's active surveillance. If he's just set up alerts, they might not have triggered yet. If he's actively tracking your location, you're already compromised, and this is damage control. Either way, we eliminate evidence where we can. And then what? I can't go home. You said if I go home, this conversation ends. I said if you go home and pretend this didn't happen, we're done. But you're not going to do that. Rains leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed in a way that contrasted sharply with the intensity of his gaze. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to be exactly 3 minutes late, flustered enough that Victor believes you lost track of time, but not so upset that he suspects anything else. You're going to put away groceries and make lunch and be the wife he expects. I don't understand. You just said, I said I can't help someone who won't help themselves. Running right now, without a plan, without resources, without proof, that's not helping yourself. That's panic. And panic gets you caught or killed. Rains pulled a small flash drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. This contains software that will create a hidden backup of everything on your husband's computer. Files, emails, browsing history, everything. Can you install it without him knowing? Elena stared at the flash drive. I don't know how to... It's automatic. You plug it in, it runs in the background, you remove it when the light stops blinking. It takes about 10 minutes if his hard drive isn't completely full. Can you get 10 minutes alone with his computer? Maybe. He takes a shower every night at 8:30. Exactly 8:30. 20 minutes, like clockwork. Perfect. Tonight, during his shower, you install the software. Tomorrow, you find a reason to leave the house. Library, grocery store, anywhere with public Wi-Fi. You call me from a payphone or a borrowed phone, we meet, and you give me the drive. I'll have my people analyze everything, build a case that separates you from his crimes. Your people, Elena repeated. You mean criminals. I mean forensic accountants, digital security experts, and lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear. Some of them have questionable pasts. All of them are very good at what they do. Rains finished his coffee. You want the legal route? The proper channels? You can try. But Victor's a city official with a clean record and a house full of evidence that points to you. The system will eat you alive before you get a chance to defend yourself. I'm offering you an alternative. Why? The question burst out of Elena before she could stop it. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why are you willing to do this? Because I can. Because I have resources that most people in your position don't. And because... Rains paused, something almost vulnerable crossing his face before his mask of control slammed back into place. Because my mother died thinking she had no options. I won't watch another woman believe the same lie. Elena's throat tightened. She looked down at the flash drive, so small and innocuous, holding the potential to either save or destroy her. What if I get caught? What if Victor notices the drive or realizes what I'm doing? Then you call me immediately and we move to plan B. Which is? You disappear. Tonight. I have safe houses where Victor can't find you, resources to keep you hidden while we build the case remotely. It's messier, riskier, and means you can't ever go back to anything resembling your old life. But it's better than dead. The word hung between them, stark and terrible in its honesty. He'd kill me? Elena whispered. Men who traffic human beings don't have qualms about eliminating threats. And right now you're the biggest threat to his operation. You know what he's doing. You can identify his network. If he even suspects you're going to expose him. Rains didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Elena checked her phone. 11:34. 26 minutes to get home and she still needed to buy groceries. I have to go. Remember, 3 minutes late, flustered but not panicked. You lost track of time picking out produce or comparing prices. Something mundane that he can verify if he checks your location history. Elena stood on shaking legs, clutching her purse with the flash drive now burning a hole in its depths. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough? Rains stood as well, and for the first time since she'd met him, his expression softened into something almost gentle. You spilled coffee on one of the most dangerous men in Baltimore and survived. You found my number from a blurry photograph and tracked me down in less than 2 hours. You called me instead of going home like he expected. You're stronger than you think, Elena. You just need to remember it. He walked out without another word, leaving Elena standing in the coffee shop with a flash drive in her purse and a plan that terrified her more than staying had. She made it home at 12:03, her arms full of grocery bags, her explanation ready. Victor met her at the door with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. "You're late." "I know. I'm so sorry. The store was packed and the checkout lines were ridiculous, and I couldn't find the brand of pasta you like, so I had to ask someone, and—" The words tumbled out in a breathless rush that was barely performance. Her heart was hammering hard enough that the panic felt real. Victor took one of the bags from her arms, peered inside at the contents. "You bought too many vegetables." "They were on sale. I thought—" "You thought wrong. We've talked about impulse purchases." "I'm sorry. I'll return them." "It's fine." He carried the bag into the kitchen, and Elena followed with the others, her skin crawling with the certainty that he knew, that somehow he'd tracked her movements, listened to her call, discovered everything and was just waiting to spring the trap. But Victor simply helped her unpack the groceries, commenting on prices and placement and whether she'd remembered to use the reusable bags like he'd asked. Normal, routine, the mundane domesticity of a Saturday afternoon. Elena made lunch, grilled chicken salad with precisely measured portions, and they ate at the dining table while Victor talked about his morning inspections. A problem with load-bearing walls in a Canton renovation, a contractor who was cutting corners on electrical work. The usual stories that Elena had learned to respond to with appropriate interest and questions that made Victor feel heard. "I've been thinking about your job situation," Victor said as he finished his salad. Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh? You've been moping around all morning. I know you enjoyed the work, even if the environment wasn't appropriate." He reached across the table to take her hand. "What if you did freelance bookkeeping from home? You have the skills. I could help you find clients through my city contacts. You'd have structure to your days, income, but you'd be here where I can, where we can spend more time together." The offer was so reasonable, so thoughtful, that for a moment Elena almost forgot the bruises on her wrists and the trafficking files on his computer. This was the Victor who'd courted her, who'd seemed genuinely interested in her happiness, who'd made her believe she was choosing partnership instead of imprisonment. "That's really sweet," she made herself say. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, no pressure. I just want you to be happy, Elena. You know that, right?" "I know." After lunch, Victor settled in the living room with his tablet to review inspection reports. Elena cleaned the kitchen with mechanical precision, her mind racing. The flash drive in her purse upstairs felt like it was broadcasting its presence, screaming her betrayal to anyone who listened. 8:30. She had to wait until 8:30. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena reorganized the linen closet because Victor had mentioned it looked sloppy. She prepped dinner, pot roast with root vegetables, cooking low and slow the way Victor preferred. She folded laundry and answered Victor's occasional questions about household matters and played the role she'd perfected over 3 years of marriage. At 6, Victor's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression darkening. "When? How bad?" "No, I'll come look at it now." He ended the call and stood. "Problem with a building downtown, possible structural collapse. I need to assess it before Monday." Elena's heart leapt. "Now? But it's Saturday evening." "Emergencies don't wait for business hours. I'll probably be gone a few hours." He grabbed his jacket and inspection tablet. "Don't wait up for dinner. Eat without me." The front door closed. Elena counted to 60, then ran to the window to watch his car pull away. The moment his taillights disappeared around the corner, she bolted upstairs to Victor's office. Her hand shook so badly she could barely get the key into the lock. The door swung open to reveal the same immaculate space she'd violated that morning. The computer sat dark and innocent on the desk. Elena pulled the flash drive from her purse, sat in Victor's chair, and powered on the machine. Her birthday? Backwards. The desktop loaded with its color-coded files and perfect organization. She inserted the flash drive. A small window popped up. Auto-run detected. Install backup protocol? Elena clicked yes before she could overthink it. A progress bar appeared. 0% complete. Estimated time, 8 minutes. She watched the percentage climb with agonizing slowness. 5%. 10%. 15%. What if Victor came back? What if this was a test, the emergency call a setup to see if she'd snoop again? What if... Her phone buzzed. Elena jumped, her heart stopping, certain it would be Victor calling to tell her he knew, he'd always known, and now she'd pay for her betrayal. but the text was from a number she didn't recognize. Stay calm, you're doing fine. Dr. Dominic Raines. Somehow knowing she'd need the encouragement exactly when panic threatened to overwhelm her, Elena took a shaking breath and watched the progress bar. 25%, 30%, 35%. The software was pulling everything. She could see file names flashing by too quickly to read, financial records, email archives, encrypted folders she'd never known existed. The sheer volume of data suggested Victor had been using this computer for far more than city inspection work. 50%, 60%. Elena's ears strained for the sound of a car in the driveway, footsteps on the porch, Victor's key in the lock. The house remained silent, except for her own labored breathing and the quiet hum of the computer. 75%, 80%. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Victor. Going to be later than I thought. Foundation issues are worse than reported. Don't wait up. Elena wanted to cry with relief. Instead, she typed back, okay, be safe, 90%, 95%. The progress bar hit 100% and a new message appeared. Backup complete, remove device safely. Elena ejected the flash drive with trembling hands and shoved it deep into her pocket. She closed all the windows, shut down the computer, locked the office door, and returned the key to its hiding place in the hallway bookshelf. Only then did she let herself collapse against the wall, her legs shaking too badly to hold her weight. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Now she just had to get the drive to Raines without Victor discovering what she'd stolen. Elena barely slept that night. She lay beside Victor in their bed. He'd returned just after midnight, smelling like concrete dust and damp buildings, and watched the ceiling while her mind spun through scenarios. What if the flash drive hadn't captured everything? What if Victor had encryption that blocked the backup? What if she got caught trying to pass it to Raines? Sunday morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. Victor was in an unusually good mood, humming as he made his precise breakfast and scrolled through news on his tablet. I'm meeting David Morrison for coffee this morning, he announced. City business, political networking. You know how it is? Elena did know. Victor's Sunday morning meetings were sacrosanct, never to be disturbed, which meant she'd have at least 2 hours of freedom. I'll probably run to the library while you're gone, she said, keeping her tone casual. Return those books that are due. It was a safe excuse. Victor approved of libraries, of reading improving literature, of activities that kept her occupied but isolated. Good idea. You've been cooped up in the house too much lately. Fresh air will do you good. The irony of Victor encouraging her independence while simultaneously destroying it wasn't lost on Elena. She nodded and finished her oatmeal and waited for him to leave. The moment his car disappeared down the street, Elena grabbed her purse and headed for the library. But she drove past it, continued 3 blocks to a shopping center with a bank of payphones outside a closed electronics store. She fed quarters into the machine with shaking hands and dialed the number Raines had made her memorize. He answered on the first ring. Location. Payphone, shopping center on Howard Street. I know it. Blue sedan in the northwest corner of the lot in exactly 12 minutes. Flash your headlights twice. How will I know it's you? You won't. That's the point. Just trust me. The line went dead. Elena returned to her car and drove to the northwest corner of the lot. She waited, her eyes scanning every vehicle that entered, her heart jumping at every blue sedan that wasn't quite right. At exactly 12 minutes, a blue Toyota Camry pulled into the space beside her. The windows were tinted dark enough that she couldn't see the driver. Elena flashed her headlights twice. The passenger window rolled down. Dominic Raines sat in the driver's seat, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. Drive to the library like you planned, he said. Park in your usual spot. Go inside for exactly 30 minutes. When you come out, there will be an envelope under your windshield wiper. It's a list of instructions for tomorrow. Memorize them and destroy the paper. Understand? The flash drive is in your coat pocket, right side. Check. Elena reached into her pocket. The drive was gone. She hadn't felt him take it, hadn't noticed any contact at all. How did you set? Practice. The instructions tomorrow are important, Elena. Follow them exactly. No improvisation, no second guessing. Can you do that? Yes. Good. The window started to roll up, then paused. You did well last night. Getting the data was the hard part. Everything else is just execution. He drove away before Elena could respond. She sat in her car for another moment, feeling the absence of the flash drive like a phantom limb, before driving to the library as instructed. She returned books she'd already finished, browsed the new fiction section, checked out 2 novels that Victor would approve of. Exactly 30 minutes. When she returned to her car, a plain white envelope was tucked under her windshield wiper. Elena grabbed it quickly, shoved it into her purse, and drove home with her heart pounding. Victor was already back when she arrived, sitting at the dining table with papers spread out in front of him. "How was coffee?" Elena asked, setting down her library books. "Productive. David's concerned about the Harbor Point development. Thinks there might be some zoning irregularities that need investigating." Victor didn't look up from his papers. "How was the library?" "Good. Got some new books." Elena excused herself to the bathroom, locked the door, and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typed instructions. Monday, 2 p.m. Maintenance appointment for your car at Schmidt's Auto on Eastern Avenue. Victor has already been notified. He arranged it last week. You forgot to tell him about the check engine light. Appointment will take 2 hours. Take Uber from Auto Shop to Central Library, not your usual branch. 3rd floor, northwest corner, table by the window. Bring nothing but your ID and phone. Come alone. We'll talk about what comes next. Destroy this after reading. Elena read the instructions 3 times, committing every detail to memory. Then she tore the paper into tiny pieces and flushed them down the toilet, watching them swirl away like her old life disappearing down a drain. She had less than 24 hours to prepare for a meeting that would either save her or destroy everything she'd ever known. Monday arrived with crystalline clarity, one of those November days where the sky was impossibly blue and the air sharp enough to cut. Elena woke early, went through her morning routine with mechanical precision, and tried not to think about the fact that by evening, nothing might ever be the same. Victor left for work at 7:30 as always. Elena counted to 100 after the door closed, then pulled out her phone and Googled Schmidt's Auto on Eastern Avenue. It was real. A legitimate repair shop with decent reviews and a website showing services and pricing. If Victor checked, and of course he would check, everything would align perfectly with Raines's cover story. At 1:45, Elena drove to the shop. A mechanic in greasy coveralls greeted her with a clipboard. "Varelli? Yeah, we got your appointment. Check engine light, right?" "Right," Elena said, impressed despite herself at how thoroughly Raines had constructed the illusion. "Should take a couple of hours. You need a ride somewhere?" "I'll call an Uber, thanks." Elena stood on the sidewalk outside the shop and requested a ride to the Central Library. The driver was a college student who spent the entire 15-minute drive explaining his thesis on postmodern architecture. Elena made appropriate listening noises while her mind raced ahead to what waited for her at the library. The Central Library was a massive Beaux-Arts building in the heart of downtown, all marble columns and soaring ceilings. Elena had only been here once, years ago, when she'd first moved to Baltimore. Victor preferred she use the smaller branch library near their house, easier to monitor, fewer people, less chance of unexpected encounters. She climbed to the 3rd floor, found the northwest corner, spotted the table by the window. Dominic Raines was already there, dressed in dark slacks and a button-down shirt. Looking like any other patron deep in research, he had a laptop open in front of him and papers spread across the table. Elena slid into the chair across from him. "Hi. Thank you for coming." Raines didn't look up from his screen. "To anyone watching, we're strangers sharing a table in a crowded library. Keep your voice down and your body language casual." Elena nodded, trying to appear relaxed despite every muscle in her body vibrating with tension. "I've had my people analyze the data you retrieved," Raines continued, his tone conversational, like he was discussing weather. "Your husband is more ambitious than I initially thought. The trafficking network is just one branch of a larger operation. He's also running a sophisticated real estate fraud scheme, using his position as a building inspector to condemn properties with fabricated violations, then acquiring them through shell companies at a fraction of their value." Elena felt sick. How long has this been going on? At least 5 years. Probably longer. He started small, minor corruption, kickbacks, the kind of thing that's sadly common in city government, but he got greedy. Or maybe just bolder. The trafficking operation is relatively new, maybe 18 months old. That's when he started using your inheritance money. "Can you prove I wasn't involved?" Raines finally looked at her, his gray eyes sharp and assessing. "I can prove you didn't know. The digital forensics show that every suspicious transaction occurred from Victor's devices, during times when you were working at Marcello's, or can be otherwise accounted for. Your email account shows evidence of access from his IP address, suggesting he's been monitoring and controlling your communications. And there's something else. He turned his laptop so she could see the screen. It showed an email exchange between Victor and someone named Jay Chen. "Read the date," Rains said. Elena squinted at the timestamp. That's 6 months before we got married. Now read the content. The email was clinical in its brutality. Target identified. Elena Varelli, 28, forensic accountant at Mercer and Associates. Family inheritance estimated 2 to 3 million. No close family, isolated social network. Responsive to attention and validation. Recommend standard approach. Charm offensive, rapid courtship, financial enmeshment. Timeline. Engagement within 6 months, marriage within 12. The word swam in front of Elena's eyes. He planned it, all of it. He targeted me for my inheritance. He ran a con, Rain said quietly. An exceptionally long, exceptionally cruel con. Every moment of your relationship has been calculated exploitation. Elena thought she might vomit. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of believing that despite the abuse, despite the control, Victor had loved her once, that something about her had been worth loving, even if he'd twisted it into something ugly. But it had all been fake. Every smile, every compliment, every moment of tenderness, all of it had been performance, strategy, manipulation in service of stealing her inheritance and framing her for his crimes. "I need to sit down," she whispered, then realized she was already sitting. I can't breathe," Rain said, his voice cutting through the spiral. "In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Do it." Elena forced herself to breathe, to count, to anchor herself in something other than the screaming realization that her entire adult life had been a lie. "Better?" Rains asked after a minute. "No, but I'm functional. That's all we need right now." He closed the laptop. "Here's what happens next. My team is building a comprehensive case that separates you from Victor's crimes while documenting everything he's done. We're coordinating with federal investigators who've been tracking the trafficking network but didn't know about Victor's involvement. When we move fast and we move hard. He won't have time to destroy evidence or hurt you." "When?" "Soon. Days, not weeks. But we need to get you somewhere safe first." Elena shook her head. "I can't just disappear. He'll know something's wrong. He'll what? Get violent?" "Elena, he's been violent for years. The only difference is that now you're planning to fight back, and that terrifies you more than compliance ever did." The accusation stung because it was true. Some terrible part of Elena had made peace with being Victor's victim because at least she understood those rules, knew how to navigate that reality. Fighting back meant stepping into unknown territory where the rules didn't exist and the outcome was uncertain. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you alert. Fear keeps you alive. What will get you killed is hesitation." Rains leaned forward slightly. "I have a safe house in Fells Point. Small apartment, discreet building, security I trust. You can stay there while we finalize everything. Pack one bag, leave during one of Victor's inspection runs, text him that you're visiting a friend in DC for a few days. By the time he realizes something's wrong, you'll be untouchable." "What if he comes after me anyway?" "Then he deals with me." The words were delivered with such casual certainty that Elena almost believed them. "I've built my reputation on protecting what's mine. You're under my protection now. Anyone who tries to hurt you answers to me." "I'm not yours," Elena said, some spark of her old self flaring to life. Rain smiled, the expression transforming his face into something almost warm. "No, you're not. Poor phrasing. Let me rephrase. You've asked for my help, and I've agreed to provide it. Part of that help is ensuring your physical safety. Better? Better. Then we have a deal?" Elena thought about Victor, about the house in Bolton Hill that had become her prison, about the inheritance he'd stolen and the life he'd destroyed and the women whose lives he'd purchased and sold like commodities. She thought about the email that proved she'd never been anything but a mark, a target, a resource to be exploited. And she thought about the woman she'd been before Victor, confident, capable, smart enough to graduate top of her class and build a career she'd loved. That woman was still in there somewhere, buried under 3 years of systematic destruction. Maybe it was time to let her out. "We have a deal," Elena said. Rains pulled a key from his pocket and slid it across the table along with a piece of paper. "Address: 6th floor, apartment 6C. The building has security cameras, but they're on a loop during specific windows. Those times are listed on the paper. Move during a window and nobody will have footage of you entering. There's a burner phone in the kitchen drawer, pre-programmed with my number. Use it for all communication from now on. Your regular phone stays with you for now. We need Victor to think everything's normal for a few more days. Elena pocketed the key and paper. What do I tell him? About today? Nothing. Your car will be ready in an hour. The check engine light issue was minor, already fixed. You spent the time at a coffee shop reading one of your library books. Boring, routine, exactly what Victor expects. You've thought of everything. I've been planning operations since I was 22 years old. This is what I do. Rain stood, gathering his papers. Go home tonight. Act normal. Pack your bag tomorrow during his inspection run. Move to the safe house during the listed window. And Elena? Yes? Don't say goodbye to anyone. Don't give him any warning. Just disappear. He walked away, leaving Elena sitting at the library table with a key that felt like both a promise and a threat burning in her pocket. She had 24 hours to pack up the fragments of her destroyed life and trust that a criminal she barely knew could deliver the justice the system never would. 24 hours to become someone brave enough to fight back. 24 hours until everything changed. Elena drove home from the auto shop with the key to apartment 6C pressed against her thigh like a talisman. The November sun was already sinking toward the horizon, painting Baltimore's skyline in shades of amber and rust. She'd memorized the address Raines had given her, burned the paper in a gas station bathroom, and flushed the ashes. The instructions about security camera windows were etched into her mind. Tuesday 2 to 2:15 p.m., Thursday 11:30 to 11:45 a.m., Saturday 6 to 6:15 a.m. Tomorrow was Tuesday. She had less than 24 hours. Victor's car was already in the driveway when she pulled up. Elena's stomach clenched. He wasn't supposed to be home until 6. She checked her phone. 4:47 p.m., over an hour early. She gathered her purse and the library books she'd used as props and walked into the house with her explanation ready. The check engine light, the boring wait at the auto shop, the coffee and reading to pass the time. Simple. Verifiable. Exactly what Victor would expect. He was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed and his phone in his hand. The muscle in his jaw was twitching. "You're home early," Elena said, keeping her voice light despite the warning bells screaming in her head. "Where were you?" Not a greeting, not an explanation for his early arrival, just the question, delivered in that too calm tone that meant danger. Auto shop. The check engine light came on last week, remember? You scheduled the appointment. She set down her books and purse, careful to maintain casual body language. They said it was just a sensor issue, already fixed. Show me the receipt. Elena's mind went blank. Receipt. She should have a receipt. Normal people got receipts from auto shops, but she'd been so focused on getting to the library, on meeting Raines, that she hadn't thought, "I didn't get one," she said, thinking fast. They said they'd email it. Something about their printer being broken. Victor's eyes narrowed. Convenient. I can call them if you want. Ask them to send it now. I already called them. He pushed off from the counter, moving closer. Talked to a mechanic named Ray. Very helpful. Confirmed you were there from 1:45 to 3:30. 2 hours. Just like they estimated. Relief flooded through Elena. Raines's people had covered every detail. See? I told you. What I don't understand, Victor continued, his voice dropping lower, is why your phone's location history shows you at the Central Library from 2:15 to 3:45. The relief turned to ice in her veins. That's not possible, she said, even as her mind raced. The burner phone. She was supposed to use the burner phone, but Raines had told her to keep her regular phone, had said Victor needed to think everything was normal. I thought maybe there was a mistake. GPS errors happen, so I checked the library's security footage. Victor pulled up something on his phone, turned it to face her. Care to explain this? The image showed Elena walking through the library's main entrance, timestamp 2:17 p.m., clear as day, undeniable. She scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't immediately condemn her. I got an Uber from the shop. I was bored and I wanted something else to read, so I went to the Central branch instead of waiting around the auto shop. Is that a crime? You lied about it. I didn't lie. I just didn't mention it because it wasn't important. Everything you do is important, Elena. Every choice you make, every place you go, every person you interact with. We've discussed this. Victor set his phone down with deliberate precision. Who did you meet? Nobody. I was reading. For an hour and a half? It's a library. That's what people do there. Show me your library card activity. Show me what you checked out. Elena pulled her library card from her wallet with shaking hands. She hadn't checked out anything at the Central Branch. Hadn't even thought about maintaining that part of the cover story. Victor took the card, pulled out his phone again, and navigated to the library's website. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, accessing her account with a password she hadn't known he had. Last activity was Sunday, at the Bolton Hill branch, where you checked out. He squinted at the screen. 2 mystery novels. Nothing today, nothing at Central. I was just browsing. I didn't find anything I wanted. You expect me to believe you took an Uber across town to browse for 90 minutes without checking out a single book? I was reading magazines. They don't require checkout. Which magazines? I don't remember. Architecture maybe, or design? Does it really matter, Victor? Yes, he said quietly, dangerously. It matters, because you're lying to me. Again. And I'm starting to wonder what else you're lying about. Elena forced herself to meet his eyes, to project innocence and confusion instead of the terror clawing up her throat. I'm not lying. I went to the library because I was bored, that's all. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but it honestly didn't seem worth mentioning. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then he reached out and grabbed her purse from the counter, upended it onto the kitchen table. The contents spilled out: wallet, phone, lip balm, a crumpled tissue, loose change, her keys. And there, among the debris, the key to apartment 6C that Raines had given her, distinctly different from her other keys. Newer, unmarked. Victor picked it up. What's this? Elena's heart stopped. I don't know. Maybe something from the auto shop? Sometimes they give you temporary keys when they work on your car. Ray didn't mention anything about keys. Victor held it up to the light, examining it. This is a residential key. Apartment building, if I had to guess. Modern lock, probably installed within the last 5 years. Then, I don't know where it came from. Maybe it's been in my purse for weeks and I never noticed. Maybe. Victor pocketed the key. Or maybe you've been making plans, meeting people, arranging things behind my back. That's crazy. Who would I even meet? You've made sure I don't know anyone in this city. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, edged with the bitterness she usually worked so hard to hide. Victor's expression shifted, something cold and calculating settling over his features. You blame me for your isolation. How interesting. He walked to the kitchen drawer, the one where he kept various tools and odds and ends, pulled out a small black device Elena didn't recognize. Do you know what this is? She shook her head. Signal detector. Very sensitive. Can pick up electronic frequencies within a 50-foot radius. He powered it on, waved it slowly across the pile of her belongings on the table. Let's see what we find. The device remained quiet as it passed over her wallet, her phone, her lip balm. But when it approached her coat, still draped over the back of the chair, it began to beep. Victor's smile was terrible to witness. He reached into the coat pocket and pulled out the burner phone Raines had mentioned, the one Elena was supposed to find in the apartment, except somehow it had ended up in her possession, and she had no memory of how or when. Well, Victor said softly, what do we have here? Elena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only watch as Victor powered on the phone, navigated through its minimal interface, found the single programmed number. He pressed call. The phone rang once before connecting. Elena couldn't hear what was said on the other end, but she saw Victor's expression darken further. Dominic Raines, he said into the phone, his voice pleasant and conversational. I wondered when you'd make your move. Tell me, how long have you been fucking my wife? Victor, no, Elena started. He held up a hand to silence her. Really? Just helping her out of the goodness of your heart? How noble, how completely unbelievable. A pause. Is that a threat? Because I have to tell you, threatening a city official is a serious crime, almost as serious as kidnapping and conspiracy to commit fraud. Victor listened for another moment, then laughed. By all means, try. But you should know that every criminal transaction, every illegal transfer, every piece of evidence you think implicates me, it all points to her. She's the account holder. She's the signatory. She's the one who inherited dirty money and laundered it through my network. I'm just the honest husband who discovered his wife's crimes and reported them to the authorities. Elena felt the walls closing in, felt the trap Victor had spent 3 years building snap shut around her. I'll be in touch, Victor said, and ended the call. He turned to Elena with an expression of profound disappointment. You really thought you could outsmart me? You, with your limited understanding of how power actually works in this city? You're a monster, Elena whispered. I'm pragmatic. There's a difference. Victor pocketed the burner phone along with the apartment key. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack a bag. Enough for a few days. You're going to get in the car. And you're going to come with me somewhere quiet where we can discuss your future. And if I refuse, then I make a phone call to a very sympathetic police captain who's been investigating financial crimes in Baltimore. I show him the evidence I've carefully compiled over the past 3 years. You're arrested, charged, and convicted. You spend the next 20 years in prison while I play the heartbroken husband who never suspected his beloved wife's criminal enterprise. But people will see through that, will they? I'm a respected city inspector with an impeccable record. You're a former waitress with no alibi, no witnesses, and a bank account full of illegal money. Who do you think they'll believe? Elena looked at the man she'd married, really looked at him for perhaps the first time, saw the calculation in his eyes, the complete absence of anything resembling love or remorse. He'd never been human to her, just a role he'd played with exceptional skill. You won't get away with this, she said. I already have. You just haven't accepted it yet. Victor moved toward her, and Elena instinctively backed away. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Pack your bag. Get in the car. We'll work something out that keeps you alive and me in control. It's the best deal you're going to get. The doorbell rang. Victor froze. Are you expecting someone? Elena shook her head. The doorbell rang again, followed by a heavy knock. City police, open up! Victor's mask of control slipped for just a moment, confusion and rage warring across his features. Then it snapped back into place, and he was once again the concerned citizen, the cooperative official. He opened the door to reveal 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a dark suit holding a badge. Victor Hale, the woman asked. That's me. How can I help you, Detective? Detective Sarah Chen, Baltimore PD Financial Crimes Unit. We have a warrant to search the premises and seize all electronic devices and financial records. She handed him a document. You're also being asked to accompany us downtown for questioning regarding allegations of money laundering, fraud, and human trafficking. Victor's face went pale. This is outrageous. On what evidence? Anonymous tip corroborated by federal investigators. You have the right to remain silent. I know my rights, Victor snapped. He looked past the detective to Elena, standing frozen in the kitchen doorway. This is your doing. You and your criminal boyfriend. Sir, I'm going to need you to step outside, Detective Chen said firmly. I want my lawyer. You can call them from the station, officers. Take Mr. Hale into custody. Process him and transport him downtown. The uniformed officers moved in, one of them producing handcuffs. Victor didn't resist, but the look he gave Elena as they led him past her held a promise of retribution that made her blood run cold. This isn't over, he said quietly. You have no idea what you've started. Then he was gone, loaded into the back of a police cruiser while neighbors started emerging from their houses to watch the spectacle. Detective Chen approached Elena with an expression that was professionally neutral, but not unkind. Monsieur Hale, I'm going to need you to answer some questions as well. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but we'll need your full cooperation as we investigate your husband's activities. I want a lawyer too. Chen nodded. That's your right. In the meantime, I'd suggest you find somewhere else to stay. This house is a crime scene now. We'll be processing it for the next several days. Elena watched as more police vehicles arrived, as officers began carrying out boxes of evidence, as her life was dismantled piece by piece in front of the watching neighbors. She should feel relief, should feel vindicated, should feel something other than the numbness spreading through her chest. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Car waiting at the corner. Black SUV. Get in. Elena looked up and down the street. Sure enough, a black SUV with tinted windows idled at the corner, exactly where the text had indicated. Detective Chen? Elena said. I need to collect some personal items if I'm going to leave. Make it quick. Take only what you need immediately. Everything else is evidence. Elena went upstairs to the bedroom she'd shared with Victor for 3 years. She pulled a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. Practical things, warm things, nothing that carried memories of the woman she'd been when she'd lived in this house. She grabbed her laptop, her phone charger, the few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to her grandmother. In the bathroom, she paused at the mirror. The woman looking back was still a stranger, still too thin and too scared. But there was something different now, a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, the beginning of something that might eventually become strength. Elena shouldered the duffel bag and walked back downstairs. Detective Chen was directing officers, marking evidence, maintaining the professional efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times before. "I'm leaving," Elena said. "How do I reach you if I have information?" Chen handed her a business card. "Call that number anytime, and Mrs. Hale? You might want to consider getting your own attorney, someone not connected to your husband, just in case." "In case of what?" "In case the evidence suggests you were more involved than you claim." The words hit like a physical blow. Elena wanted to scream that she'd been a victim, that Victor had orchestrated everything, that she'd had no idea. But the detective's expression suggested she'd heard it all before, from people far more convincing than Elena. Instead, Elena just nodded and walked out of the house in Bolton Hill for the last time. The black SUV's passenger door opened as she approached. Elena climbed in, not knowing who she'd find in the driver's seat, but no longer caring. Anywhere was better than watching her prison get dismantled by strangers. Dominic Raines sat behind the wheel, his expression grim. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Did Victor threaten you?" "Yes, but the police showed up before he could do anything." Elena dropped her duffel bag at her feet. "How did you arrange that? The warrant, the arrest? That all happened impossibly fast." "I told you I was coordinating with federal investigators. They've been building a case against the trafficking network for months. All I did was point them toward Victor as a key player and provide evidence that corroborated their existing investigation." Raines pulled away from the curb, driving with the kind of careful attention that suggested he was watching for tails. "The local detective, Chen, she's good people. Not on my payroll, not corruptible, but smart enough to recognize credible evidence when she sees it. Victor said all the evidence points to me, that I'm the one who'll go to prison. Victor's wrong. My forensic accountants have been working around the clock to build a paper trail that proves you were a victim, not a participant. Every transaction, every forged signature, every piece of digital evidence, it all demonstrates a pattern of identity theft and financial abuse. You're not going to prison, Elena." "But I heard what Chen said, about getting my own lawyer, about me being more involved than I claim. That's standard procedure. She has to investigate all possibilities. But trust me, the evidence will exonerate you." Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the nightmare was ending instead of just transforming into something new. But 3 years of living with Victor had taught her that trust was dangerous, that hope was a weapon people used against you. "Where are we going?" she asked instead. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere Victor can't reach you even if he makes bail." "Will he make bail? For trafficking charges?" "Depends on his lawyer and the judge. But even if he does, he'll be under surveillance. The FBI doesn't let suspected traffickers walk around freely." Raines navigated through Baltimore's evening traffic with the ease of someone who knew every shortcut and back road. "You did well today, keeping your composure when he confronted you, not breaking when he tried to intimidate you. That took courage." "I was terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." They drove in silence for a while, leaving the familiar streets of Bolton Hill behind, heading toward the waterfront. Elena watched the city transform from residential to commercial to industrial, the landscape changing with each passing mile. Finally, Raines pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a modern high-rise. He used a keycard to access the resident section, parked in a spot labeled 6C. "This is the safe house?" Elena asked. "One of them. I own 4 units in this building under various corporate entities. This one is the most secure." He grabbed her duffel bag before she could protest. "Come on, let's get you settled." The elevator required another keycard to access the 6th floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in neutral beige. Doors spaced far enough apart to suggest generous square footage. Apartment 6C sat at the end of the hall, positioned to offer views in 2 directions. Raines unlocked the door and gestured for Elena to enter first. The apartment was larger than she'd expected. Open floor plan, modern kitchen with stainless appliances, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. The furniture was minimal but expensive, all clean lines and neutral colors. It looked like a hotel suite designed by someone with excellent taste and unlimited budget. "Guest room is through there," Raines said, pointing to a hallway. "Bathroom is stocked with basics. Kitchen is fully equipped. There's a laptop on the desk with secure internet access. Use that for any research or communication, not your personal devices. Elena set down her purse and turned to face him. Why are you doing this? I told you. No, not the story about your mother and your father. The real reason. You've spent money, time, resources on someone who can't possibly repay you. You've put yourself and your organization at risk by going after a city official. Why? Rains was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the windows, looking out at the harbor where boats bobbed in their slips, and the city lights were beginning to sparkle in the dusk. Because I can, he said finally. Because I have power and money and influence. And if I don't use them for something other than accumulating more power and money and influence, what's the point? My father was a monster who used his position to hurt people. I refuse to be the same kind of monster wearing different clothes. So I'm what? Your redemption project? You're someone who deserves better than what life has given you. Someone who's smart enough and strong enough to survive 3 years of systematic abuse and still have the courage to fight back. That's not common, Elena. Most people break. You bent, but you didn't shatter. He turned from the window to look at her directly. I'm not your savior. I'm just someone with resources who's willing to use them on your behalf. What you do with that help is entirely up to you. Elena sank onto the couch, exhaustion hitting her all at once. What happens now? Now you rest, eat something, take a shower, let your nervous system realize you're safe for the first time in years. Rains moved toward the door. I'll be back tomorrow morning with updates on Victor's case. In the meantime, there's a panic button by the front door. Press it if you feel threatened, and my security team will be here in under 3 minutes. Don't answer the door for anyone except me. Don't use your personal phone for anything sensitive. Don't contact anyone from your old life. I don't have an old life. Victor made sure of that. Then this is your chance to build a new one. He paused at the door. You're stronger than you think, Elena. You're just going to have to learn to believe it. After he left, Elena sat in the silent apartment and tried to process everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been trapped in a house with a man who'd orchestrated her entire life as an elaborate con. Now Victor was in police custody, she was in a safe house owned by a criminal, and her future was a blank page that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She walked to the windows and looked out at Baltimore's harbor. Somewhere out there, Victor was sitting in an interrogation room, probably spinning lies and building defenses and planning his counterattack. He wouldn't go down easily. Men like him never did. But for the first time in 3 years, Elena wasn't alone in the fight. She pulled out her phone and stared at Detective Chen's business card. The smart thing would be to call, to cooperate fully, to distance herself from Dominic Raines and his criminal connections before they dragged her down too. But Chen had looked at her with suspicion, had implied that Elena might be complicit in Victor's crimes despite everything she'd endured. The legal system, the proper channels, the official route. None of it had protected her when she'd needed protection. None of it would believe her story without the evidence Raines's people had compiled. Elena set down the phone without making the call. She opened the laptop Raines had mentioned, found it already connected to a secure network. For a moment, she considered searching for information about Dominic Raines, learning more about the man who'd appointed himself her protector. But exhaustion was pulling at her, making her eyes heavy and her thoughts slow. Instead, she found the guest room, neat and impersonal as a hotel, and collapsed onto the bed still fully dressed. Sleep claimed her almost immediately, pulling her down into darkness where Victor's voice couldn't follow and fear couldn't find her. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar windows and someone was knocking on the apartment door. Elena sat up, disoriented, her heart hammering before she remembered where she was and why. The knocking continued, firm but not aggressive. Elena crept to the door and checked the peephole. Dominic Raines stood in the hallway holding 2 coffee cups and a paper bag that smelled like fresh pastries. She unlocked the door and let him in. "Morning," he said, handing her a coffee. "Wasn't sure how you take it, so I got it black with cream and sugar on the side." "Black is fine." Elena took the cup gratefully, the warmth seeping into her hands. "What time is it?" 9:30. "I let you sleep. Figured you needed it." He set the pastries on the kitchen counter. "We need to talk about what happens next." Elena followed him to the small dining table, her stomach knotting with anxiety. Did something happen with Victor's case? Victor made bail. $2 million posted by an attorney named Richard Voss, who specializes in defending city officials. He's out as of 7 this morning. The coffee turned bitter in Elena's mouth. He's free? With significant restrictions. Ankle monitor, travel limitations, regular check-ins with a monitoring officer. He can't leave Maryland, can't access his office computer or city hall, and he's prohibited from contacting you directly or through intermediaries. Rains pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. It made the morning papers. City inspector arrested in trafficking scheme. Victor's face is all over the news. His reputation is destroyed. Elena read the article, which detailed the charges without naming her specifically. It says the inspector's wife is cooperating with investigators. That makes it sound like I knew something. That's spin from Victor's legal team. They're trying to muddy the waters, create reasonable doubt by suggesting you were involved. Rains took a sip of his own coffee, which is why you need to get ahead of this. Make a formal statement to the police, cooperate fully with Detective Chen, establish yourself as a victim before Victor's narrative takes hold. I thought you said your evidence would exonerate me. It will. But evidence doesn't matter if public opinion convicts you first. Baltimore is a small city in the ways that matter. Reputations are built and destroyed in weeks, not months. You need to control the narrative. Elena's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I don't know how to do that. That's why I'm here. Rains pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the table. Margaret Reeves, best defense attorney in Maryland. She's expecting your call this morning. She'll coordinate with the prosecutors, manage your statement to police, and make sure everything you say helps rather than hurts your case. I can't afford an attorney like that. You don't need to. I've already retained her services. Dominic, don't argue. This is non-negotiable. You need proper legal representation, and Margaret is the best. He leaned back in his chair. Besides, think of it as an investment in justice. Victor spent 3 years building a cage around you. The least I can do is help you build the case that puts him in an actual cage. Elena looked at the business card, at the elegant lettering, and the address in Baltimore's most expensive legal district. What do I owe you for all this? There has to be something you want in return. There is. Rains met her eyes directly. I want you to survive this. I want you to rebuild your life into something worth living. I want you to prove that bastards like Victor don't always win. He paused. And someday, when you're strong enough and stable enough and free enough to choose, I want you to help the next woman who spills coffee on me and has bruises she tries to hide. Pass it forward. That's all I ask. The simplicity of it was somehow more devastating than if he'd demanded money or loyalty or anything else she could quantify and repay. He was asking her to become the kind of person who helped others, who used her pain for purpose, who transformed victimhood into strength. I don't know if I can be that person, Elena said quietly. You already are. You just don't see it yet. Rains stood. Call Margaret. Make the appointment. Tell the police everything. And Elena? Yes? When you tell your story, don't minimize what he did. Don't soften it to make yourself look less foolish or less damaged. Tell them the truth, all of it, no matter how ugly or humiliating, because every detail you share is another nail in Victor's coffin. After he left, Elena sat at the table with Margaret Reeves's business card and the coffee Rains had brought her, and the beginning of something that felt dangerously close to hope. She picked up her phone and dialed the attorney's number before she could talk herself out of it. A professional voice answered on the second ring. Reeves and Associates, how may I direct your call? This is Elena Virelli. I believe Margaret is expecting my call. One moment, please. Classical music played while Elena waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was real. This was happening. She was about to step into a legal battle against a man who'd orchestrated her entire life, who had connections and resources and 3 years of carefully constructed evidence pointing to her guilt. Elena? A woman's voice, warm but authoritative. This is Margaret Reeves. Thank you for calling. I've been reviewing the preliminary evidence in your case, and I have to say, you've been through hell. The unexpected sympathy made Elena's eyes sting. That's one way to put it. I prefer accuracy to euphemism. Your husband is a sociopath who targeted you for financial exploitation and framed you for his own criminal enterprise. That's not a marriage. That's a long-form assault. Papers rustled on the other end of the line. Now here's what we're going to do. I'm going to coordinate with the prosecutors and set up a formal interview with Detective Chen for tomorrow morning. You'll tell them everything. The abuse, the isolation, the financial control, all of it. I'll be there to make sure you don't inadvertently incriminate yourself. Then we'll start building the affirmative case that proves you were a victim, not an accomplice. What if they don't believe me? They will. Because Dominic's forensic team has provided documentation that supports every element of your story. You're not asking them to take your word for it. You're showing them proof. Margaret's voice softened slightly. Elena, I know this is terrifying, but you're not alone anymore. You have an entire team working to make sure justice is served. All you have to do is tell the truth and let us handle the rest. Okay, Elena whispered. Okay. What time tomorrow? 10 a.m. Baltimore Police Headquarters, downtown. I'll meet you in the lobby at 9:45. Dress conservatively, minimal makeup, no jewelry except maybe a simple necklace. We want you to look sympathetic, not wealthy. I am sympathetic. I don't have anything except what I grabbed in a duffel bag yesterday. Even better, wear whatever feels most like yourself. The goal is authenticity, not performance. Margaret paused. One more thing, don't talk to any reporters. Don't post on social media. Don't discuss the case with anyone except me and Dominic. Victor's team will be looking for any statement they can twist against you. Give them nothing. After she hung up, Elena sat in the silent apartment and tried to imagine walking into a police station to describe the worst years of her life to strangers. Tried to imagine sitting across from Detective Chen and admitting that she'd been stupid enough, desperate enough, broken enough to stay with a man who'd systematically destroyed her. The shame was overwhelming. But underneath it, smaller and harder, was the beginning of anger. Victor had stolen 3 years of her life, had targeted her, manipulated her, isolated her, and used her as a pawn in his criminal enterprise. He'd taken the inheritance her grandmother had worked a lifetime to build and turned it into blood money that funded human trafficking. And now he was out on bail, probably sitting in some lawyer's office, spinning stories about his innocent involvement and his criminally ambitious wife. Elena walked to the windows and looked out at Baltimore's harbor, at the city where Victor had built his perfect reputation and his hidden empire. Somewhere out there, young women were trapped in situations they couldn't escape, suffering because men like Victor saw them as commodities instead of people. She thought about Raines's words. Someday, when you're strong enough, help the next woman. Maybe that started here. Maybe telling her story to the police wasn't just about clearing her own name. It was about making sure Victor's entire network was exposed and dismantled, every person he'd worked with, every transaction he'd facilitated, every victim he'd harmed. Elena pulled out the laptop and started writing. Not a legal statement. Margaret would help her with that tomorrow. This was something else. A timeline of her marriage, from the first charming date to the last terrifying confrontation. Every instance of control, every escalation of abuse, every red flag she'd ignored because she'd wanted so desperately to believe someone could love her. The words poured out, raw and painful and honest. She wrote until her hands cramped and her eyes burned. Wrote until the shame started transforming into something cleaner and sharper. By the time she finished, it was past midnight. The document was 12 pages long, single-spaced, chronicling 3 years of systematic destruction in brutal detail. Elena saved it with a simple title, The Truth. Then she crawled into bed and slept dreamlessly for the first time in years, her laptop beside her holding evidence of her own survival. Morning came too quickly. Elena woke to her alarm at 8 a.m., her stomach already churning with anxiety about the interview ahead. She showered in the unfamiliar bathroom, dressed in the simplest clothes she'd packed, dark jeans and a cream sweater that had been her grandmother's, and stared at her reflection while trying to recognize the woman looking back. The bruises on her wrists had faded to shadows, barely visible unless you knew to look for them. But the damage Victor had done ran deeper than anything that showed on skin. Elena could see it in the tension around her eyes, the way she held her shoulders slightly hunched, as if perpetually bracing for impact. The flatness in her expression that came from years of learning not to show emotion that could be used against her. She applied minimal makeup as Margaret had suggested, just enough to look put together without seeming like she was trying too hard. The goal was authenticity, the lawyer had said. The goal was truth. Elena gathered her laptop with the 12-page document she'd written and headed to the door, then stopped. The panic button Raines had shown her sat innocuously by the entrance, a simple device that could summon help in under 3 minutes. She'd never needed it, but knowing it was there had let her sleep through the night without jumping at every sound. The black SUV was waiting in the parking garage when she emerged from the elevator. A different driver this time. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor who introduced herself simply as Marie and said nothing else during the 20-minute drive to police headquarters. Margaret Reeves was already waiting in the lobby when Elena arrived at 9:45. She was younger than Elena had expected, maybe 50, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a designer suit that probably cost more than Elena had earned in 6 months of waitressing. but her handshake was warm and her smile genuine as she pulled Elena aside. "How are you holding up?" Margaret asked. "Terrified." "Good. That means you understand the stakes." Margaret guided her toward a seating area away from the main traffic. "Detective Chen is going to ask you a lot of questions. Some of them will feel invasive or humiliating. Answer them anyway. Don't minimize what happened, don't try to protect Victor, and don't worry about how you look. The truth is your best defense." "What if I start crying or can't finish a sentence?" "Then you cry and you take your time. Emotion isn't weakness in this context. It's proof that what happened to you was real and devastating." Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I have copies of the timeline you wrote last night. Dominic sent it to me. It's remarkably detailed and will be very useful in corroborating your statement." Elena flushed. "I didn't know he'd share that. It was just, I needed to get it out of my head." "It's powerful evidence. Shows a consistent pattern of abuse and control over an extended period. May I use it during the interview? If you think it will help?" "It will." Margaret checked her watch. "Ready?" Elena wasn't. Would never be ready to walk into a police station and expose every humiliating detail of her failed marriage to strangers. But she nodded anyway because the alternative was letting Victor win, and she'd already decided that wasn't an option. Detective Chen met them in the lobby, her expression professionally neutral. She led them through security, up an elevator, down a hallway lined with offices and interview rooms. The space Chen directed them into was small and windowless, dominated by a table and 4 chairs. A camera mounted in the corner blinked with a red recording light. "Everything we discuss will be recorded," Chen said as they settled into chairs. "You're not under arrest, and you're free to leave at any time. Your attorney can stop the interview if she feels any questions are inappropriate. Understood?" "Understood," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Chen opened a folder and pulled out several photographs, spreading them across the table. They showed the Bolton Hill townhouse, Victor's office, the computer Elena had accessed with the flash drive. "Let's start with what you know about your husband's activities. When did you first become aware that Victor Hale was involved in criminal enterprises?" Elena took a breath and started talking. She described finding the files on Victor's computer, the email proving he'd targeted her for her inheritance, the trafficking documentation, and shell company transfers. She explained about the flash drive, about Dominic Raines offering to help, about the desperate calculation that had led her to steal evidence from her own husband. Margaret interjected occasionally to clarify a point or redirect a question that strayed too close to asking Elena to speculate rather than report facts. But mostly she let Elena speak, let the story unfold in all its ugly detail. "Why didn't you go to the police immediately when you discovered the files?" Chen asked. "Because I was terrified," Elena said simply. "Victor had spent 3 years convincing me that I was invisible, that nobody would believe me, that any attempt to expose him would only make things worse, and he'd set everything up to look like I was the criminal, not him. I thought if I went to the police, I'd be the one arrested. So you went to Dominic Raines instead, a known criminal with ties to organized crime in Baltimore." Margaret's hand touched Elena's arm in warning, but Elena didn't need the reminder to be careful. "I went to the only person who'd offered to help, who seemed to understand what I was dealing with and had resources to fight back. Did it occur to you that Raines might have his own agenda? That helping you could serve his interests in ways you don't understand?" "Of course it occurred to me. I'm not stupid, detective. But I was out of options and out of time. Victor was escalating. I could feel it. If I'd waited for official channels to maybe possibly believe me someday, I'd probably be dead." Chen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes that might have been respect. "Tell me about the abuse. How long had it been going on?" This was harder. Elena had written about it in her timeline, had organized the incidents chronologically and dispassionately. But saying the words out loud, watching Chen take notes while the camera recorded everything, that made it real in a way that felt like being flayed alive. She talked about the first time Victor had grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks, how he'd apologized so profusely that she'd convinced herself it was an accident, about the gradual isolation, the monitoring, the financial control disguised as helpfulness, about the bruises that came more frequently, always carefully placed where clothes would hide them, about the night he'd held her head underwater in the bathtub for 10 seconds, while explaining that accidents happened in homes all the time, that she should be more careful. "Why didn't you leave?" Chen asked, and Elena heard the question she'd been asking herself for 3 years. "Where would I go? He'd alienated my family, destroyed my friendships, taken my career. I had no money he didn't control, no place he couldn't find me. No one who would believe me over him. Elena's voice cracked, and some part of me still thought it was my fault. That if I just tried harder, was better, more perfect, he'd go back to being the man I thought I'd married. Did you ever fight back? Physically defend yourself? Once, early on. He'd grabbed my arm during an argument and I pushed him away. He fell against the kitchen counter. Elena closed her eyes, remembering. He used it against me for months. Told me I was violent, unstable, dangerous. Threatened to call the police and report that I'd assaulted him. I never fought back again. Margaret leaned forward. Detective, I think we've established a clear pattern of domestic abuse and psychological manipulation. Can we move on to the financial crimes? In a moment. Chen pulled out another photograph, this one showing Elena and Victor at some charity gala, both of them smiling for the camera. To an outside observer, you two looked happy, even loving. Were there times when the relationship was genuinely good? Elena stared at the photograph, at the woman she'd been in that moment, perfectly dressed, perfectly made up, wearing the smile Victor had taught her to produce on command. No, she said quietly. That's the thing people don't understand about abuse. It's never good. It's just periods of less bad that you mistake for happiness because you're so desperate for relief. The interview continued for 2 more hours. Chen asked about specific transactions, specific dates, whether Elena had signed documents or authorized transfers. Margaret produced the forensic evidence Raines's team had compiled, walking the detective through the timeline that proved Elena had been at work or otherwise accounted for during every suspicious activity. I have one final question, Chen said as they neared the end. If you could say anything to other women in similar situations, what would it be? Elena thought about the trafficking victims in Victor's files, the women whose names and faces haunted her dreams. Thought about all those people who'd suffered because she'd been too broken and too scared to act sooner. I'd tell them it's not their fault, that the person hurting them is very good at making them believe they deserve it, that they caused it, that nobody else would want them. But it's all lies. She met Chen's eyes directly. I'd tell them to find one person who believes them and hold on to that belief like a lifeline. Because you can't escape a cage when you can't see the bars. Chen closed her folder. Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Hale. We'll be in touch if we have additional questions. What happens now? Elena asked. Now we continue building the case against your husband. The federal investigators are coordinating with our department to dismantle his entire network. It's going to take months, maybe years. But I can tell you this. Chen's professional mask slipped slightly, showing something almost warm underneath. You're not going to be charged with anything. The evidence clearly establishes you as a victim. You're free to rebuild your life. The word should have brought relief, should have felt like vindication. Instead, Elena just felt hollow, scraped clean of everything except exhaustion. Margaret walked her out of the police station, through the gauntlet of reporters who'd somehow learned about the interview and were shouting questions Elena didn't answer. The SUV was waiting at the curb, Marie already behind the wheel. You did beautifully, Margaret said before Elena climbed in. I know it didn't feel that way, but you were credible and sympathetic and entirely believable. Victor's legal team is going to have a very hard time painting you as a co-conspirator after that testimony. What about his trial? Will I have to testify again? Almost certainly, but we'll prepare you thoroughly. And Elena? Margaret's expression softened. Consider talking to a therapist, someone who specializes in trauma, what you've been through, that leaves scars that don't heal without help. Elena nodded and climbed into the SUV, grateful when Marie pulled away from the cameras and the questions and the whole overwhelming reality of what she'd just done. Her phone buzzed as they merged into midday traffic. A text from Raines. How did it go? She typed back, survived, exhausted. His response came immediately. Come to my office. I have something to show you. Elena almost declined. The idea of doing anything except collapsing in the safe house apartment felt impossible. But curiosity won out over exhaustion, and she directed Marie to the address Raines had included with his text. The office was in a renovated warehouse in Fells Point, the kind of building that had probably housed manufacturing equipment decades ago, and now held expensive lofts and creative studios. Marie led her through a lobby with exposed brick and industrial lighting, up an elevator that required yet another key card, to a top-floor suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Raines met her at the door, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes sharp with concern. How bad was it? Bad. But Margaret says I did well, so I guess that's something. Elena looked around the space. Open floor plan, minimal furniture, walls covered with screens displaying what looked like financial data and security feeds. This is where you work? One of several locations. This is the legitimate side of my business. Import-export, logistics consulting, investment management. He gestured toward a conference table where several people were working on laptops. My team has been analyzing Victor's network in detail. We found something I think you need to see. He led her to a private office off the main floor, closed the door, and pulled up a file on his computer. Remember the women's names in Victor's trafficking files? Elena's stomach clenched. Yes. We've been trying to locate them. Most of the trails went cold, victims scattered, documentation destroyed, whole operation shut down and relocated. But we found one. Rains turned the screen toward her. Her name is Sofia Martinez, 23 years old. She was trafficked through Victor's network 2 years ago, sold to a brothel in Washington, D.C., and has been trapped there ever since. The photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and terrified eyes, staring at the camera in what looked like a police booking photo. Why are you showing me this? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Because I'm planning to get her out, tonight, but it's going to be complicated and dangerous, and I wanted you to understand what your evidence is accomplishing. Sofia is just one of at least 40 women we've identified in Victor's files. Every piece of information you provided, every detail you remembered, it's giving us the tools to find them and bring them home. Elena stared at Sofia's photograph, at the fear and resignation in her expression, and saw herself reflected back. Different circumstances, different kind of cage, but the same essential trap, being controlled by men who saw women as objects to be used and discarded. What do you need from me? She asked. Rains looked surprised. Nothing. You've already done more than enough. That's not what I asked. What do you need from me to get Sofia out? Elena, this isn't your fight. You just spent 3 hours reliving your trauma for the police. You don't have to... Yes, I do. She met his eyes directly. You said someday I'd help the next woman. Why not start today? Rains studied her for a long moment. It's dangerous. The people who run these operations don't let their assets walk away. There will be violence. Are you prepared for that? No, but I'm going anyway. He pulled out a chair at the conference table in his office. Then sit. Let me explain what we're dealing with. For the next hour, Rains walked Elena through the operation he'd planned with his team. The brothel where Sofia was being held operated under the cover of a massage parlor in a rough neighborhood in southeast D.C. It was owned by a man named Vincent Koslow, who had connections to Russian organized crime and a reputation for brutality. Getting Sofia out meant getting past Koslow's security, past the other women who'd been conditioned to report escape attempts, past the electronic monitoring systems that tracked every movement. We've been planning this for 3 days, Rains explained, pulling up schematics on his screen. We have people on the inside, a client who's actually undercover FBI, a delivery driver who's willing to leave a door unlocked. The extraction window is narrow, 15 minutes from the time we enter to the time we need to be gone. What's my role? Elena asked. You stay in the vehicle with Marie. You're our emergency contact. If something goes wrong and we can't extract Sofia ourselves, you call the FBI tip line and report a trafficking situation in progress. Give them Koslow's name, the address, everything we've compiled. It won't save Sofia immediately, but it'll put enough pressure on Koslow that he'll have to move or shut down, which gives us another chance. That's it? I just wait in a car? That's everything. You're our insurance policy, Elena, not our soldier. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could do more, but the rational part of her brain recognized that Rains was right. She had no training, no experience with this kind of operation, no skills beyond basic accounting and survival instinct. Going inside would only create another person they'd have to protect. When do we leave? She asked instead. 6 p.m. It's a 2-hour drive to D.C., and we need to hit the location at precisely 8:30 when there's a shift change in Koslow's security rotation. Rains checked his watch. That gives you 5 hours to rest and prepare yourself for what you might see. Elena spent those hours in Rains's office, reviewing the files on Sofia and the other women they'd identified. Each one had a story, recruited through false job promises, kidnapped from vulnerable situations, sold by family members who saw them as burdens rather than people. Each one had been processed through Victor's network with the same cold efficiency he'd used to organize his inspection reports. The weight of it was crushing. Elena had spent 3 years suffering under Victor's control, but at least she'd been alone in her cage. These women had been bought and sold, their bodies commodified, their humanity erased, and Victor had profited from every transaction. At 5:30, Rains knocked on the office door. "Time to go. Are you sure about this?" Elena closed the file on Sofia Martinez and stood. "I'm sure." The team that gathered in the warehouse parking lot was smaller than Elena had expected. Just Rains, 2 men she didn't recognize who moved with military precision, and Marie, who would be driving the extraction vehicle. They wore dark clothes without any identifying marks, and they carried equipment Elena recognized from movies but had never seen in real life. Weapons, communications gear, what looked like lock-picking tools. "Remember," Rains said to Elena as they loaded into 2 separate vehicles, "you stay with Marie. No matter what you hear on the comms, no matter what seems to be happening, you do not leave the vehicle unless I explicitly tell you to. Understood?" "Understood." The drive to DC was tense and silent. Marie navigated through rush-hour traffic with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this before, while Elena sat in the back seat and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. She clutched her phone with the FBI tip line number already dialed, her thumb hovering over the call button. They reached Southeast DC just after 8, parking 2 blocks from the target location in an area of the city that had clearly seen better days. Abandoned storefronts competed with check-cashing places and liquor stores, and the few people on the streets moved with the wary alertness of those who knew danger when they saw it. Rains and his team exited their vehicle and disappeared into the shadows. Elena watched them go, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. "First time?" Marie asked quietly from the front seat. "First time for a lot of things lately," Elena admitted. "Boss doesn't usually bring civilians on operations. You must be special." "I'm just someone he's helping." Marie glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "He doesn't help people unless they're worth helping. Trust me on that." Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Rains, in position, going silent. The next 15 minutes stretched like hours. Elena stared at her phone, at the dark street beyond the vehicle's windows, at Marie's calm profile. Somewhere in that massage parlor 2 blocks away, Dominic Rains was risking his life and his freedom to save a woman he'd never met because it was the right thing to do. The thought made her ashamed of every moment she'd hesitated, every time she'd chosen compliance over resistance, every day she'd let fear win. At 8:47, 3 figures emerged from the shadows, running toward the vehicle. Rains was in the lead, his arm around a small figure wrapped in a blanket. The 2 other men provided cover, their bodies positioned to block any pursuit. Marie had the vehicle moving before they'd even finished piling into the back seat. Elena found herself face-to-face with Sofia Martinez, who looked even younger than her photograph suggested, her eyes wide and disoriented. "You're safe," Elena said quietly. "We're getting you out of here." Sofia just stared at her, shock written across her features in ways that suggested she didn't believe anything Elena was saying. They were 3 blocks away when Elena heard the shouting behind them. 4 blocks when she saw vehicles in pursuit. Marie took a corner hard enough to throw everyone against the side of the vehicle, then another, weaving through residential streets with the kind of driving that suggested intimate familiarity with escape routes. "Lost them," one of Rains's men said after 5 minutes of tense silence. Marie didn't slow down until they'd crossed back into Maryland and were well clear of DC's boundaries. Only then did the tension in the vehicle ease slightly. Rains turned to Sofia, his voice gentle in a way Elena had never heard before. "Sofia Martinez?" The girl nodded, her eyes still wide with fear. "My name is Dominic. This is Elena. We're not going to hurt you. We're taking you somewhere safe where you can decide what you want to do next. Do you understand?" "You're not police," Sofia whispered. "No, but we work with police when it serves our interests. Right now, our only interest is making sure you're safe and healthy and free to make your own choices." "Why?" The question was so small, so broken, that Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "Because someone should have done this 2 years ago, and they didn't. We're trying to make that right." Rains handed her a bottle of water. "There's a doctor waiting who specializes in trauma care. She'll examine you, make sure you're not injured, and help you figure out next steps. Everything is your choice from here on out. Nobody is going to force you to do anything, okay?" Sofia took the water with trembling hands and nodded. They drove to a private medical clinic in Baltimore's suburbs where a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and gentle hands examined Sofia while Elena waited in the lobby with Rains. She's going to need a lot of help, Elena said quietly. I know. I have people who specialize in this, therapists, social workers, lawyers who can help with immigration status if needed. She'll have every resource we can provide. Rains leaned back against the wall, exhaustion finally showing on his face. But you know as well as I do that resources aren't enough. She needs to believe she's worth saving. That's the harder part. How do you teach someone that? You show them, every day. Through actions, not words. You prove that the world has people in it who will fight for them without expecting anything in return. He looked at Elena directly. The same way I'm trying to show you. The doctor emerged an hour later with Sophia, who looked cleaner and calmer, but still terribly fragile. Physically, she's malnourished and has some old injuries that healed poorly, but nothing requiring immediate intervention. Psychologically, the doctor paused. That's going to take time. She's agreed to stay in a residential facility I recommend that specializes in trafficking survivors. They'll work with her on trauma processing and life skills. Can I visit her? Elena asked, surprising herself. Sophia looked at her with those two old eyes. Why would you want to? Because I know what it's like to be trapped. Different circumstances, but the same feeling. And I want you to know that you're not alone. Something shifted in Sophia's expression. Some tiny crack in the wall of defense she'd built around herself. Okay. Rains arranged for Sophia to be transported to the facility with two of his security team providing protection. Elena watched the vehicle drive away and felt something settle in her chest that might have been purpose. Thank you, she said to Rains, for letting me be part of this. You didn't just observe, you were the reason we knew where to find her. Your evidence, your willingness to expose Victor's network, that's what made this possible. He gestured toward his vehicle. Come on, let's get you home. They drove back to the safe house in silence, Elena too emotionally exhausted to process everything that had happened. It was only when they pulled into the parking garage that she realized something had shifted. The apartment didn't feel like a hiding place anymore. It felt like a base of operations, a launching point for something larger than her own survival. Get some rest, Rains said as they rode the elevator up. Tomorrow we start phase 2. Which is? Going after the rest of Victor's network. We saved one woman tonight. There are 39 more out there who need the same help. And then, his expression hardened, we make sure Victor pays for every life he destroyed. Elena unlocked the apartment door and turned to face him. I want to help, not just with information. I want to be actively involved in taking him down. Elena, you said I was stronger than I thought. Prove you meant it. Give me something real to do. Rain studied her for a long moment. There's a fundraising gala 3 weeks from now. Baltimore's elite, all the people who've been whispering about Victor's arrest and wondering what really happened. Victor will be there. His bail conditions allow it, as long as he doesn't leave Maryland. His lawyers want him seen in public, maintaining his innocent persona. You want me to go? I want you to walk in there on my arm and show everyone that you're not hiding, not ashamed, not broken by what he did. I want you to look him in the eye and let him see that he didn't win. Rains paused. But only if you're ready. Only if you think you can handle being in the same room with him. Elena thought about Sophia's eyes, about the 40 women still trapped in Victor's network, about the 3 years she'd spent believing she had no power and no options, thought about the woman she'd been before Victor and the woman she was becoming after him. I'll be ready, she said. And for the first time since spilling coffee on Dominic Rains in Marcello's restaurant, Elena actually believed it. The 3 weeks before the gala passed in a blur of activity that left Elena exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. During the day, she worked with Rains's team to identify and locate the remaining women in Victor's trafficking files. At night, she met with Margaret Reeves to prepare for the inevitable trial, going over testimony and evidence until her head ached. But the work that mattered most happened in the quiet hours when she visited Sophia at the residential facility. The first few visits were stilted and awkward. 2 women who'd survived different versions of the same nightmare trying to find common ground. But slowly, tentatively, something resembling friendship began to form. You're different than I expected, Sophia said during their 4th visit, her English improving with each conversation. When Dominic said someone wanted to help, I thought you'd be, I don't know, a social worker or something, someone who does this for a living. I'm just someone who understands, Elena replied. They were sitting in the facility's garden, autumn leaves falling around them in shades of red and gold. My cage was different than yours, but it was still a cage. The man who hurt me. He's part of the same network as your husband. Was. Victor's operation is mostly dismantled now. The FBI has arrested 12 people so far, and they're still working through the evidence. Elena paused. We found 23 of the women from his files. Most of them are in facilities like this one, getting help. The others, we're still looking. Sophia was quiet for a moment, picking at the threads of her sweater. What happens to the ones who don't want to be found? Who think this life is all they deserve? We keep looking anyway. We keep offering a door out, even if they're not ready to walk through it yet. Elena took Sophia's hand gently, the same way Dominic kept offering me help until I was ready to accept it. You love him. Not a question. A statement of observed fact. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. I barely know him. That's not what I asked. Sophia's eyes held a wisdom that had nothing to do with her 23 years. You look at him the way I used to look at freedom. Like, maybe it's possible, even if you're scared to believe it. The observation stayed with Elena long after the visit ended. Did she love Dominic Raines? The question felt too large and too complicated to examine directly. He'd saved her, yes, but he'd also given her the tools to save herself. He'd offered protection without demanding submission in return. He'd treated her like someone worth fighting for when she'd forgotten she had any value at all. But love? That felt dangerous. Like trusting something that had betrayed her before. Elena was still thinking about it a week later when Raines took her shopping for a gala dress. He'd insisted on accompanying her, claiming he knew which boutiques wouldn't sell her information to tabloids, but Elena suspected he just wanted to make sure she actually went through with it. The shop was in an upscale neighborhood, all cream carpets and flattering lighting. The owner, a woman named Claudia who greeted Raines like an old friend, pulled dresses without asking Elena's size or preferences, somehow knowing exactly what would work. Try this one first, Claudia said, handing her a floor-length gown in deep emerald silk. Elena changed in a private fitting room, staring at her reflection with something close to shock. The dress transformed her, highlighting curves she'd forgotten she had, making her skin glow against the rich fabric. She looked like someone important, someone powerful. She stepped out to show Raines, and the expression that crossed his face made her breath catch. That's the one, he said quietly. I haven't tried the others yet. Doesn't matter, that's the one. He stood and walked closer, his eyes never leaving her face. You look like yourself, the version of yourself you were always meant to be. Elena turned back to the mirror, trying to see what he saw. I look terrified. You look strong. There's a difference. Raines met her eyes in the reflection. Are you having second thoughts about the gala? Every single day. Elena smoothed the silk with trembling hands. What if I freeze when I see him? What if I fall apart in front of everyone? Then you fall apart, and I'll be there to catch you. But Elena, he turned her to face him directly. I don't think you're going to fall apart. I think you're going to walk into that ballroom and remind every person there that surviving doesn't mean staying silent. The gala was being held at the Belvedere, one of Baltimore's historic hotels, in a ballroom that had hosted presidents and diplomats and generations of Maryland's elite. Elena stood in the safe house apartment the night of the event, wearing the emerald dress and the grandmother's pearl necklace she'd managed to salvage from the Bolton Hill house, and tried to steady her breathing. Her phone buzzed. Margaret Reeves. Detective Chen will be at the gala tonight. So will FBI agents monitoring Victor. You're not alone in this. Another text, this one from Sophia. You're braver than you know. Show them who you really are. Elena took one last look in the mirror, applying lipstick with hands that only shook slightly, and headed downstairs where Raines was waiting. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than her first car, and he'd shaved for the occasion, making him look younger and somehow more dangerous. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression that made Elena's pulse quicken. Ready? He asked, offering his arm. No. But let's go anyway. The drive to the Belvedere took 15 minutes. Marie navigated through downtown Baltimore while Elena watched the city lights blur past the window. Somewhere out there, Victor was getting ready for the same event, probably rehearsing his lines about being falsely accused, about his vindication being inevitable. The thought made her sick. But underneath the nausea was something harder and sharper. Anger. The bone-deep rage that came from finally understanding she'd been targeted, manipulated, and nearly destroyed by a man who'd seen her as nothing more than a financial opportunity. The Belvedere's entrance was clogged with luxury vehicles and camera flashes. Reporters had gathered despite the event being private, hoping to catch glimpses of Baltimore's power brokers and the scandalous city inspector who'd been arrested for trafficking. Rains helped Elena from the vehicle, his hand steady on her elbow as flashbulbs exploded around them. She heard someone shout questions. "Is that Victor Hale's wife? Are you still married? Did you know about the trafficking?" But Rains guided her through the gauntlet with practiced efficiency, ignoring every question until they were inside the hotel's elegant lobby. "Breathe," he said quietly. "The hard part is over." "That was the easy part," Elena corrected. "The hard part is walking into that ballroom and facing everyone who thinks I'm either a victim to be pitied or a criminal to be investigated. Then give them a third option. Show them you're a survivor who's done being invisible." The ballroom was already crowded with Baltimore's elite when they entered. Elena recognized faces from news broadcasts and society pages, city council members, business owners, philanthropists who shaped the city through their wealth and influence. Conversations died as people noticed her arrival, whispers spreading like ripples across water. And there, across the room near the bar, stood Victor. He looked exactly the same. Same perfectly tailored suit, same practiced smile, same air of respectable authority. The ankle monitor was hidden beneath his pants, and if you didn't know he was out on bail for trafficking charges, you'd think he was just another successful professional enjoying a night out. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Victor's smile didn't falter, but something cold and calculating entered his expression. He raised his glass in a mock toast, the gesture somehow managing to be both cordial and threatening. Elena's first instinct was to look away, to find a corner where she could hide, to flee back to the safe house where Victor's gaze couldn't find her. But Rains's hand on her lower back steadied her, reminding her that she wasn't alone, wasn't powerless, wasn't the woman Victor had tried to make her. She met his stare without flinching and raised her own glass in response, a declaration of war wrapped in social nicety. "That's my girl," Rains murmured, too quietly for anyone else to hear. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and carefully neutral conversations. People who'd ignored Elena when she was married to Victor suddenly wanted to talk to her, their curiosity thinly veiled behind polite inquiries about her well-being. Elena answered with the responses Margaret had helped her prepare, brief, factual, revealing nothing that could be used against her. But she could feel Victor watching her throughout the evening, tracking her movements around the room. Twice she caught him talking to David Morrison, the councilman who'd photographed her at Marcello's, and reported back to Victor. They were planning something. She could see it in their body language, in the way they kept glancing at her and Rains. "He's going to try something," Elena said quietly during a lull in conversation. "I know. Let him." Rains guided her toward the center of the room where a small stage had been set up for speeches. "The event organizers asked me to say a few words about a new foundation I'm establishing. I want you to stand with me." "Dominic, I can't." "You can. Trust me." The ballroom quieted as Rains stepped onto the stage, Elena beside him feeling exposed and vulnerable in front of hundreds of watching eyes. She could see Detective Chen near the back, could identify at least 3 people who had the careful watchfulness of federal agents. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Rains began, his voice carrying easily across the space. "I know I'm not the usual keynote speaker for this event. Most of you know me by reputation, some of it deserved, some of it exaggerated. But tonight, I want to talk about something more important than my business ventures or my questionable past." He paused, letting the silence build. 3 weeks ago, my team and I helped rescue a young woman who'd been trafficked through a criminal network operating right here in Baltimore. She'd been trapped for 2 years, invisible to everyone around her, suffering in plain sight because the people who should have protected her chose to look away. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elena saw Victor's face darken, saw his lawyer lean in to whisper something urgent. That rescue was possible because another woman, someone who'd survived her own kind of imprisonment, was brave enough to provide evidence that exposed the entire operation. Rains turned to Elena, his expression gentle despite the public setting. Elena Varelli sacrificed her safety, her privacy, and her peace to make sure other women wouldn't suffer the way she had. And in doing so, she reminded me that real power isn't about control or manipulation. It's about using your resources to lift up the people who've been pushed down. He looked back at the crowd. "That's why I'm announcing the Varelli Foundation tonight. It will provide resources, shelter, legal assistance, and comprehensive support to survivors of domestic abuse and human trafficking. Every dollar will go toward helping women rebuild their lives, reclaim their power, and transform their pain into purpose. The ballroom erupted in applause. Elena felt tears stinging her eyes, felt the weight of hundreds of gazes that had shifted from judgment to something that might have been respect. But Victor wasn't applauding. He was moving toward the stage, his lawyer trying unsuccessfully to hold him back. "How dare you!" Victor's voice cut through the applause, loud enough to silence the room. "You stand up there and talk about helping people while you're nothing but a criminal who's corrupted my wife and destroyed my reputation with false evidence." Rains remained perfectly calm. "Mr. Hale, I wasn't aware you'd be speaking tonight. I'm speaking now." Victor climbed onto the stage, ignoring the security personnel moving toward him. "You've poisoned her against me, convinced her to lie to police, manufactured evidence to frame me for crimes I didn't commit, all because you wanted to expand your criminal empire into trafficking and needed a scapegoat." The accusation was so brazen, so completely inverted from reality, that Elena actually laughed. The sound came out harsh and brittle, surprising her as much as everyone else. "Something funny." Victor turned his attention to her, his expression venomous. "You are," Elena said, and was amazed at how steady her voice sounded. "Standing here pretending to be the victim when we both know the truth, when everyone in this room is about to know the truth." "What truth? More lies you and your criminal boyfriend have fabricated?" "The truth about why you married me." Elena pulled out her phone. Margaret had suggested she keep key evidence readily accessible, and projected an image onto the ballroom's main screen. The email from Jay Chen, outlining Victor's plan to target her for her inheritance, appeared in letters large enough for everyone to read. The crowd gasped. Elena saw reporters frantically taking notes, saw Detective Chen moving closer to the stage. "This email was sent 6 months before we met," Elena continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You planned everything, the charming dates, the rapid courtship, the isolated honeymoon where you started separating me from my family and friends. You married me for my grandmother's money. And when that wasn't enough, you used my identity to fund a trafficking network that destroyed 40 women's lives." "That's a forgery," Victor snarled. "Is it?" Rains pulled out his own phone. "Because the metadata says otherwise. And the digital forensics prove the email came from your personal account. And the IP address traces back to your Bolton Hill office." "I want my lawyer," Victor said, his mask of control finally cracking. "Your lawyer is right there," Rains pointed to the man trying to push through the crowd. "But I don't think he can help you with what's about to happen." The ballroom screens flickered and changed. Suddenly they were showing financial records, Victor's shell companies, the wire transfers, the property fraud schemes. Every transaction Elena had found on his computer now displayed for Baltimore's elite to witness. "Where did you get that?" Victor lunged toward Elena, and Rains stepped between them with the kind of casual movement that suggested violence was always an option he kept in reserve. "Don't," Rains said quietly, dangerously. "Don't even think about touching her." Detective Chen reached the stage with 2 uniformed officers. "Victor Hale, you're under arrest for violating the terms of your bail. You were ordered to avoid contact with Elena Varelli." "I didn't contact her. She's here at a public event." "That you attended knowing she would be present after being explicitly warned to stay away." Chen gestured to the officers. "Take him." The arrest happened in front of cameras and witnesses, and everyone who'd ever thought Victor Hale was a respectable professional. His lawyer was shouting about unlawful detention and procedural violations, but the officers were already reading Victor his rights and leading him toward the exit. As they passed Elena, Victor stopped and looked at her with such pure hatred that she instinctively stepped back. "You've destroyed everything," he hissed. "Everything I built, everything I worked for." "No," Elena said, and felt something settle in her chest that felt like closure. "I just stopped letting you destroy me. There's a difference." They took him away in handcuffs while reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. Elena stood on the stage beside Rains and watched her nightmare get dragged out of the Belvedere in disgrace. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Some people were applauding, others were already on their phones spreading the story. Still others were trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Margaret Reeves materialized at Elena's elbow, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes warm. "That was quite a performance," the lawyer said. "That was the truth," Elena corrected, finally spoken out loud where everyone could hear it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Elena answered questions from Detective Chen, confirmed details with FBI agents, declined interview requests from every reporter who approached her. By midnight, she was exhausted and wrung out and ready to collapse. Rains guided her out a side entrance where Marie was waiting with the SUV. They drove through Baltimore's quiet streets while Elena stared out the window and tried to process everything that had happened. "You okay?" Rains asked eventually. "I don't know what I am," Elena admitted. "I thought I'd feel relieved when Victor was finally arrested for real, when people finally knew the truth. But I just feel empty." "That's normal. You've been running on adrenaline and anger for weeks. Now that the immediate threat is neutralized, your body doesn't know what to do with itself." "What happens now? To Victor, I mean." "Now the legal system does its job. Between the trafficking charges, the fraud, the identity theft, and the violation of bail conditions, he's looking at decades in prison. His lawyer will try to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence is too overwhelming and too public. He's done, Elena. He can't hurt you anymore." The words should have brought comfort, should have felt like victory, but Elena just felt tired. They reached the safe house and rode the elevator in silence. Rains walked her to her door, hesitated before saying goodnight. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you were magnificent tonight, brave and honest and completely unbreakable. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but you should be proud of what you accomplished." "I couldn't have done any of it without you." "Yes, you could have. I just provided resources and shortcuts. The courage was all yours." He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture unexpectedly tender. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start building your future instead of fighting your past." Elena watched him walk away, feeling something shift in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude or relief. She went inside the apartment and changed out of the emerald dress, hanging it carefully in the closet like a reminder of the night she'd stopped being Victor's victim and started becoming her own person. She slept dreamlessly for 12 hours and woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and a text from Sophia. "I saw the news. You did it. You really did it." Elena smiled and typed back, "We did it. This is just the beginning." The trial took 8 months to reach its conclusion. Victor's legal team tried every delay tactic imaginable, but the evidence was too comprehensive and too damning. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: human trafficking, money laundering, fraud, identity theft, and domestic assault. Elena testified for 3 days, walking the jury through every detail of her marriage and Victor's systematic abuse. It was brutal and humiliating and necessary. But this time, when she told her story, people believed her. The evidence supported her. Justice, for once, was on her side. Victor was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. His lawyer filed appeals that would take years to resolve, but everyone knew they were futile gestures. Victor Hale was going to die in prison, his reputation destroyed, his empire dismantled, his victims finally free. Elena sat in the courtroom gallery beside Margaret Reeves and watched the sentencing with a sense of surreal detachment. This was the man she'd married, the man she'd loved, or thought she'd loved. And now he was just a stranger in an orange jumpsuit, being led away in chains while the judge's words echoed through the silent courtroom. "Justice is served," Margaret murmured. "How do you feel?" "Like I can finally breathe," Elena said, and realized it was true. The Varelli Foundation opened 6 months after Victor's conviction, occupying a renovated building in downtown Baltimore with space for offices, counseling rooms, temporary housing, and legal services. Elena threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd once devoted to survival, using her accounting skills to manage finances and her hard-won experience to connect with survivors. Sophia became the foundation's first peer counselor, using her story to help other trafficking survivors navigate their recovery. 23 women they'd rescued from Victor's network found support through the foundation's programs. And slowly, gradually, the work expanded beyond just Victor's victims to help anyone trapped in situations that seemed impossible to escape. Elena visited the foundation on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after she'd spilled coffee on Dominic Raines at Marcello's restaurant. The building was buzzing with activity, counselors meeting with clients, lawyers preparing cases, volunteers organizing donations. She found Raines in her office, looking at architectural plans spread across her desk. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised but not displeased to see him. "Waiting for you. I wanted to show you something." He gestured to the plans. "There's a property 3 blocks from here. Former hotel, 30 rooms, perfect for expanding the foundation's residential services. It's going up for auction next week. We can't afford something like that. Our budget is already stretched thin." I can afford it. Consider it an investment in a cause I believe in. Rains looked up from the plans to meet her eyes. And in a woman I've come to admire more than I thought possible. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. Over the past year, Rains had been a constant presence in her life, supporting the foundation, checking in on her recovery, helping with the endless legal aftermath of Victor's case. But he'd never pushed for anything more than friendship, never demanded payment for his help beyond seeing her heal and grow stronger. Dominic, she said carefully, why do you keep doing this? The foundation, the support, all of it. What do you get out of it? The satisfaction of seeing you become who you were always meant to be. He walked around the desk to stand in front of her. When I met you at Marcello's, you were so beaten down I could barely see the person underneath the fear. Now you run a foundation that's helped hundreds of people. You're strong and confident and making a real difference. That transformation, that's worth more than any business deal I could make. That sounds like something a friend would say. I am your friend. But Elena, he hesitated, vulnerability crossing his face in a way she'd rarely seen. I'd like to be more than that. If you're ready, if you think you could trust someone again after everything Victor did. Elena's first instinct was to refuse, to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again. But then she thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, trapped and terrified and certain she had no options. That woman would have chosen safety over possibility, would have hidden rather than risked. But Elena wasn't that woman anymore. I'm scared, she admitted, of trusting the wrong person again, of missing warning signs because I'm too eager to believe in something good. That's reasonable. Smart, even. Rains reached out and took her hand gently, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. So let's start small. Have dinner with me. Not as my project or the foundation director, just as Elena and Dominic. Two people who've both survived things that should have broken them and are trying to build something better. Elena looked at their joined hands, at the man who'd given her back her freedom and asked for nothing except to see her thrive. Dinner sounds perfect. But Dominic, yes? I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for someone to save me or protect me or make my decisions. I'm looking for a partner, an equal, someone who sees me as whole and capable on my own. I've never seen you as anything else, Rain said quietly. That's why I'm standing here hoping you'll give me a chance. They had dinner that night at a small Italian restaurant far from Marcello's and its memories. They talked about their pasts without letting those histories define them, about their hopes for the foundation and the lives they were building. It was easy and comfortable and felt like the beginning of something real. Over the next year, Elena and Dominic built a relationship based on mutual respect and shared purpose. He introduced her to the parts of his business that were completely legitimate, showed her how he was using his resources to create opportunities instead of exploiting vulnerabilities. She pushed him to be better, to use his influence for broader change, to transform his empire into something that genuinely helped the city instead of just enriching himself. The foundation continued to grow, expanding to serve more survivors and provide more comprehensive services. Elena hired a full staff, developed partnerships with other organizations, and became a recognized voice in Baltimore's advocacy community. The woman who'd once been invisible had become impossible to ignore. Sophia graduated from community college with a degree in social work and a job offer from the foundation. 23 became 40, then 60, then 90 women helped back to freedom and stability. Each one was a victory against the kind of exploitation Victor had profited from. And Victor himself rotted in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, his appeals denied, his reputation destroyed, his legacy reduced to cautionary tale about the monsters who hide behind respectable facades. Elena visited his prison exactly once, 2 years after his conviction. She signed in at the visitor's desk, went through security, and sat in a sterile meeting room while guards brought Victor out in chains. He'd aged badly. Gray had overtaken his hair, deep lines had etched themselves around his mouth and eyes, and the entitled confidence that had once defined him had been replaced with bitter resignation. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice harsh with disuse. "Closure," Elena said simply, "and to tell you something I should have said years ago." "What's that?" "Thank you." Victor's expression twisted with confusion and rage. "Thank me? For what?" "For showing me exactly who I didn't want to be. For pushing me so far down that the only direction left was up. For being such a complete monster that I had no choice but to become strong enough to fight back." Elena leaned forward slightly. You tried to destroy me, Victor. You really did. But all you managed to do was burn away everything weak and leave behind something unbreakable. You ruined my life. No, I stopped letting you ruin mine. You did the rest to yourself. Elena stood, ready to leave. I'm happy now. Genuinely, completely happy. I'm doing work that matters with a partner who respects me. I'm helping people escape the kind of traps you built. And I wanted you to understand that despite everything you took from me, you couldn't take my ability to build something better. She walked out without looking back, leaving Victor to his 45-year sentence and the knowledge that his victim had become his victor. 3 years after that morning in Marcello's, when coffee had splashed across expensive fabric and changed everything, Elena stood in the Varelli Foundation's expanded facility and addressed a room full of donors and supporters. Beside her was Dominic, who'd transformed from criminal protector to legitimate businessman and life partner. In the front row sat Sophia and 20 other women the foundation had helped rescue and rebuild. When I started this journey, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the crowded room, I was broken and scared and certain I had no value beyond what someone else decided to give me. I'd been systematically destroyed by someone who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. But I learned something crucial through that darkness. Survival isn't passive. It's not just enduring until the pain stops. Real survival means refusing to let your circumstances define your worth. She looked at the women in the front row, at the donors who'd supported the foundation's work, at Dominic, whose steady presence had helped her believe in possibility again. The Varelli Foundation exists because nobody should have to fight alone, because strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, piece by piece, with the help of people who believe you're worth fighting for. We've helped over 200 women escape trafficking and abuse. We've provided shelter, legal services, counseling, and job training. We've shown them that the cage they're in has a door and they have the power to walk through it. The crowd applauded, but Elena wasn't finished. But our work isn't done. There are still women trapped in situations they think are impossible to escape, still victims of systems designed to make them invisible and powerless. So I'm announcing today that the foundation is expanding again, opening a second location in Washington, D.C., and partnering with organizations in 3 other cities to replicate our model. Because every woman deserves the chance I got. Every woman deserves to know she's stronger than she thinks. The applause was thunderous. Elena stepped off the stage and was immediately surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. But she found her way to Sophia, who wrapped her in a tight hug. You did it, Sophia whispered. You really built something amazing from all that pain. We did it, Elena corrected. Every woman who walked through our doors, every volunteer who donated time, every survivor who shared their story, we built this together. That night, Elena and Dominic stood on the balcony of the apartment that had once been a safe house and was now simply home. The Baltimore harbor spread out below them, lights reflecting off the water in patterns that shifted with every wave. Do you ever think about that night at Marcello's? Dominic asked. Wonder what would have happened if you'd spilled that coffee on someone else? Sometimes, Elena admitted. But I think I would have found my way out eventually. Maybe not as quickly, maybe not as safely. But I was already looking for the door when you offered to help me find it. And now? Now I spend my days helping other people find their doors. It's exhausting and heartbreaking and the most meaningful thing I've ever done. She turned to face him fully. You gave me my life back, Dominic, not by rescuing me, by giving me the tools to rescue myself. You're giving me too much credit again, and you're not giving yourself enough. Elena took his hand. You could have walked away after Victor was arrested, could have decided your good deed was done and moved on to the next project. But you stayed. You supported the foundation. You believed in what we were building. You stood beside me while I figured out who I wanted to be. That was the easy part. Watching you transform from victim to victor. That's been the privilege of my life. Dominic pulled her closer. I love you, Elena Varelli. Not the broken woman I met at a restaurant, not the survivor who built a foundation. Just you, exactly as you are, still growing and changing and becoming more yourself every day. Elena felt tears sting her eyes, but they were good tears this time. Healing tears. I love you too, and I trust you, completely. That still terrifies me sometimes, but it's true. They stood together on the balcony overlooking the city where both of them had survived their own versions of hell and built something better from the ruins. Below them, Baltimore continued its endless rhythm, People living and loving and struggling and surviving. Somewhere in that city, a woman was trapped in a situation she thought was impossible to escape. Somewhere, a girl was being told she had no value beyond what someone else decided. Somewhere, a survivor was taking the first terrifying steps toward freedom. And tomorrow, the Varelli Foundation would be there to help. Because Elena had learned the most important truth of all, that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up over and over until you're finally standing on solid ground. The woman who'd once spilled coffee on a criminal and changed both their lives had become someone who changed hundreds of lives in return. She'd transformed her pain into purpose, her survival into service, her brokenness into something whole and beautiful and unbreakable. And that, Elena thought, as she stood in Dominic's arms overlooking the city she'd claimed as her own, was the best revenge of all. Not destroying Victor, though that had been necessary and just. Not even the Foundation's success, though that brought its own satisfaction. The best revenge was simply this, living fully and freely and joyfully despite everything he'd tried to take from her. Building a life worth living with a partner who saw her as an equal. Using her voice to speak for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Proving every single day that the cage he'd built couldn't hold her anymore. Elena Varelli had been targeted, manipulated, and nearly destroyed by a monster wearing a respectable mask. But she'd survived. More than that, she'd thrived. And she was just getting started.